Are you ready, Max?
We are ready to proceed.
All righty. Good morning. It is Monday, January 4th, 2021. This is a virtual workshop meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 9:00 a.m. Like to start off with roll call. We'll see who's here. Commissioner Susan Gay.
Here.
Commissioner Jay Legree.
Here.
Commissioner Dick Byrne.
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Caluzzi. Commissioner Caluzzi. You're muted, Commissioner.
I can hear.
Okay, well, now I can hear you. And Commissioner Ed Stronowski.
Here.
And I'm Mayor Stan Mills. We have a quorum and can formally conduct business today. Thank you very much. I'd also like to recognize that our city solicitor is here, Glenn Mandalis, and city manager Sharon Lynn is here. This is one of the first times in many months that you've seen myself and Glenn without masks. So take a look now, because in the future we may be meeting able to meet again in the same room with masks. Thank you for being here. I'd also like to make a few notes. Our next COVID meeting is not tomorrow, but the following week. I'd like to make a note that as of January, it's been exactly a year that the COVID came into the United States. And it's been exactly 10 months since COVID was declared a global pandemic. I want to thank, especially in this new year, as we start off, all our city staff that are all essential workers in my mind, have done a fantastic job. They've been working on the job, whether it's in City Hall or remotely at home. So a shout out goes to all our city workers. I'd also like to recognize, before we start, all our participants in the meeting today. As you know, with a virtual workshop, there's a registration period where speakers that would like to talk on different topics during the workshop register in advance. And I want to read the names, but also I would like to double check which topics you would like to talk on. We've got 13 signed up to talk. And rather than call on you for every topic, I'd like to identify your preferred topics of interest at the beginning. Dr. Michael Trejos, I assume you want to talk about wireless. Is there any other topic you'd like to talk about? He may be listening in and not able to talk, so we'll just come to him when the time comes. Rick Perry, you're signed up. Do you have any specific topics you're interested in?
Rick Perry hasn't joined the meeting yet.
Mr. Perry, Carol Eberhard is out this morning. She's signed up. Walter Brittingham, you have any particular specific topics?
Morning. Like possibly to speak about item E. Also item 6F. Thank you.
Charter and ride-on, okay. Mr. Gary Glass, are you there?
He has not joined the meeting.
Okay. Jane Conacy?
Yes, dark skies.
Okay. I'll call on you for dark skies. Frank Cooper?
So I'm going to speak on dark skies only.
Okay. Kate Markert?
Dark skies.
Okay, gotcha. Bonnie Metz, I assume you want to talk solely on the wireless topic?
Bonnie Mance has not joined the meeting.
Not yet. How about Megan Riley?
No one from Verizon or AT&T has joined.
Okay, so Andrew Peterson, Joseph Davis, from AT&T. Okay, well, I'll assume that they want to talk on the wireless topic and be able to call them. Tom Evans, you signed up recently. What is your interest today?
Tom Evans has not joined either.
Tom Evans. All righty. Well, in that case, we'll get started. Again, I want to thank everybody that's watching today, and especially those that are participating, signed up to talk. Our correspondence, I want to recognize, again, it's embedded in the agenda. If you go to our city website, go to the legislative portal, look up the meeting information for support documents, you will find a bunch of correspondence as well as support documents embedded into the agenda, and you'll be able to see what we're actually looking at ourselves during the meeting. Correspondence received, as noted, there's 5 pieces there. 4 have to do with, 1 has to do with the charter change. Now, we don't need to spend time on them. You can look in the agenda. With that, we'll go to the city manager's report. You're muted.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, commissioners and everyone who's on the call. And Happy New Year to everyone. I did want to just briefly advise last week the temporary closing of City Hall due to 2 employees who tested positive. Those employees are recovering well, and all city buildings were fumigated and disinfected carefully by our contracted cleaning service. Unfortunately, we do have some other positive cases right now, but those folks have not been in the building since it was disinfected, and they are staying home and quarantining. And we'll keep a careful watch on them. The city employees who have been in contact, and frankly, others who have not, have all, at least at this time, are in the process or have been tested. And those who are negative are proceeding. And those, unfortunately, who did test positive will be quarantining. Some do not have any symptoms, and others have mild or medium symptoms, I'll say. But we're keeping a close eye on it, and I want everyone to know that I'm personally checking on everyone, and we'll make sure that everyone is safe as possible here. Just an update on the paving program. The contractor for the paving will be finishing up this week with striping, and that, of course, is weather dependent, 1 day at a time here. Again, the work locations are Sussex Street from Columbia Avenue to 5th Street, Lake Avenue from 2nd Street to Surf Avenue, Stokely Street from Hickman Street to Scarborough Avenue, and Scarborough Avenue from Christian Street to Lake Drive. The proposals for the streetscape planning and conceptual design, proposals are due on January 21 at 2 p.m. And we'll be looking at planning and conceptual design for the first 2 blocks west of the boardwalk of Baltimore and Wilmington Avenues, 1st Street between Baltimore and Wilmington Avenues, and 2nd Street between Wilmington and Rehoboth Avenues to improve commercial viability, safety, ambiance, and access by pedestrians and bicycles. So we'll keep you posted on that. Construction continues on Lake Avenue Streetscape Improvement Project Phase 2, and that's moving along nicely throughout these months. And that's my report, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the city manager? If not, we'll move on to the city solicitor's report.
Mayor, I don't have anything new to report today.
All right, thank you very much. With that, we'll go to old business. The first item of old business is something that probably started about a year ago. I believe we're making progress on it. Since this is a zoning issue, it needs to be accepted by the mayor and commissioners. and adopt a resolution to go to public hearing where then a vote would be conducted. That's the process for zoning amendments. With that, we'll go to the first item of business is discuss the development of a draft ordinance amending chapter 270 zoning of the city code, specific to amending the definition of gross floor area in section 270-4 definitions to clarify what areas are to be included and excluded from gross floor area. This topic may include discussion of other zoning sections, including sections 270-21 relating to floor area ratio. Glenn, if you would, as usual, give a very brief synopsis on how we got here, and then we'll open it for discussion. I know that Commissioners Gay and Gossett worked with the city solicitor and building and licensing to help craft this. And so we'll get to discussion. Go ahead, Glenn.
Thank you, Mayor. So this all flows from a couple of Board of Adjustment hearings held last year. Those Board of Adjustment hearings involved commercial properties that were looking to achieve an appeal of the building official's decision. And the Board of Adjustment affirmed the building official's interpretation of the definition of gross floor area in our code. Through the process, though, we learned that the residential plan review was being conducted in a way not entirely consistent with the way the city was conducting its commercial plan reviews. So the Board of Adjustment decisions then caused the residential plan reviews to be shifted somewhat. So that the goal of this ordinance is to put the residential plan reviews back to the status quo. So the plan review will be done the same way that it was done prior to the Board of Adjustment hearings. The reality is that the result of the Board of Adjustment hearings caused a fair amount of residential properties to be considered non-conforming. So this ordinance should put that back in place. And as you mentioned, I did meet with building and licensing as well as Commissioners Gay and Gossett, and this ordinance represents a little bit of a different approach to the way that we had been looking at it previously. This ordinance specifically sets out certain things that are included within gross floor area for residential plan reviews for single and two-family dwelling units, and it lays out those things that are excluded from gross floor area for single family and two-family dwelling units. The FEMA portions that we were dealing with previously, Dennis, Jenny, and Dr. Trejos have had kind of a spirited discussion about what changes could be implemented in this ordinance to enhance our FEMA portions. Those discussions, though, have not really gotten to a conclusion where both Dennis and Dr. Trejos agree upon the amendments that would make sense. So in this version of the ordinance, all of the FEMA stuff is completely removed. To the extent that Dennis and Dr. Trejos come to some resolution or conclusion that could enhance the ordinance, we'll bring that back in a separate ordinance. But we sort of felt as though we shouldn't hold up what's been several months of work now on this gross floor area ordinance, and we should proceed.
Glenn, did you merge both gross floor area topics into one discussion?
I apologize. No, so I did. So the underground parking ordinance dealt more with the FEMA side of it. So that's an ordinance that we'll be talking about later.
So to everybody, ignore what Glenn just said about FEMA, and then he'll repeat that for the second topic. So we're back to gross floor area number 1, I'll call it. I'd like to remind everybody that the document that we're working from today is embedded in the agenda, and it's a version dated December 28th. It's the most recent version. All right, go ahead and continue, Glenn.
Sure. So I wanted to mention also that Commissioner Gay did send me a couple of proposed edits that I think are good edits. They're all in the whereas clauses. There are a couple of whereas clauses that suggest that the ordinance might be dealing with commercial projects as well. To be clear, it's only residential, single, and two-family dwelling units. So she suggests that in the whereas clause in lines 34 through 38 that the word particularly before in residential zoning districts and for commercial and residential construction, that appears in that whereas. It's a simple strikeout to fix that ambiguity, and I think that's a good fix. Also in line 19 through 20, it says, whereas the definition of gross floor area in City Code section 270-4 applies to both commercial and residential construction. That probably can be stricken since the ordinance really deals only with residential, so it doesn't need to suggest that there's any commercial aspect to this. The only other thing about this ordinance that I need to get clarity on, I mean, I'm sure there's other things that we're all going to want clarity on, but when we met with building and licensing, Commissioner Gay and Commissioner Gossett worked on figuring out the exclusions and inclusions. And in those exclusion and inclusions, we recite certain things that are below 6 foot 6 inches. The current ordinance in the definition of gross floor area excludes those areas that are under a height of 6 feet. So a basement that is 6.5 feet right now would count towards gross floor area. But if it's 6 feet or under, it wouldn't count toward gross floor area. And I was hoping to get clarity from building and licensing as to whether we should be looking to 6 foot 6 inches, which is the new proposal, or just 6 feet, which is what is currently recited in the code. I understand Matt is out today, so I don't know if we'll be able to get that clarity today, but that's one issue that still remains. Commissioner Gay or Commissioner Gossett, did you want to go through the particular inclusions and exclusions, describing them, or do you want me to do that?
I just wanted to add a couple of things about why, because it struck me that perhaps other commissioners may wonder why the format looks so different from what we've seen before. So I just wanted to add a couple of things to that. And then if Commissioner Gossett wants to go through the specifics, or if you want to go through the specifics, that's fine. I don't need to do that. But we have been working with this for about a year, and it seemed like we were twisting ourselves into pretzels to try to define an exterior wall and never really got there. And then there was also an attempt to define a deck, so we could then exclude it. There was an attempt to define a guardrail. And, the most helpful piece of information that we got in this whole process was when Matt Janis did that presentation with the drawings, basically showing exactly what is and isn't counted, because it wasn't as though no decks were counted in gross floor area, because covered decks were and still are. So his drawings really brought all of that to light, and the drawings are great. And frankly, I hope that they are used in some way, so that, because it's a good way of educating the public too, when people come to them to with their plans. In addition to that, both Patrick and I looked at ordinances from other cities, and interestingly enough, gross floor area is commonly defined as the exterior face of the exterior wall. I mean, so our wording was not really any different from the standards in a lot of ordinances. But what we found is that many cities list the component parts. They'll have a definition for gross floor area, but they'll say it includes, and it'll list all the component parts. And given what Matt had shown in the slides, we thought, yes, this is the way. This will get us around all of our attempts to find one word or one definition that covers it all, because frankly, we can't. So by including all the elements, we basically laid everything out there and hopefully taken away the ambiguity once and for all. So that's why there's a list in the code this time.
So I just got a text from Matt, who is listening, and he said that basically the code kind of varies between 6 foot and 6 foot 6 inches in different areas. He thinks though that the most appropriate approach is to go 6 foot 6 inches in the gross floor area section,
Okay.
Which is what Commissioners Gay and Gossett had developed, and you see that in the inclusions and exclusions that are in the proposed ordinance.
Commissioner Calusi?
Yes, thank you. With that one clarification about the 6 foot 6 inches, I know, in fact, in my own house, that in the basement we do have space that's 6 foot 6 inches that do not count against. and our house was built in 2003. So anyway, that's, I'm glad to hear that we're going to stay with 6 foot 6 inches. But my second one, and the one I'm most, I guess, concerned about, because I could not find reference to it, was there's supposed to be, or as I understand it in the past, 250 square feet for a front porch that can be covered is excluded from gross floor area. Is that not, is that in there? Am I missing something?
Well, this is only 270-4, the definitions. That's covered elsewhere.
I think that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
this does not delete that,
Right.
that credit.
Okay, well, as long as it doesn't delete the credit, that's
Yeah.
fine.
This just makes the definition a lot longer.
Yeah, right.
And hopefully a lot clearer.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
And just for further comment, in working with also our code company, E360, talking through code adjustments across the country with municipalities, this format of listing inclusions and exclusion is becoming more and more the norm of municipal codes, so that the interpretation aspect is not left up necessarily to a building inspector, but can have an actual listing, so that through transitions of personnel, there is one consistent message that is being shared and understood by not only the building officials, but also the residents or consumers.
I think it's a good format.
Any other questions? Well, if not, I'm sorry, Commissioner Legree, unmute yourself there.
I applaud what Susan and Patrick have done. As a form code advocate, being inclusive is wonderful. Thank you, folks.
Thank you. So if everybody is satisfied with this version, we'll go to public comment in a second, but if everybody seems to be satisfied with this version with the amendments as noted about 6 foot 6 inches, and also omitting commercial so that this is applicable only to residential, then the next step would be to go to public hearing. But let's ask the members of the public. Let's see. Rick Perry, did you come on?
Rick Perry is not joined.
Okay, not joined. Walter, Gary Glass, did you want to talk about? Gary Glass, come on board and tell me what topics you're interested in so that I can call on you at the appropriate times.
Yeah, I'm just really interested in the shuttle service or the jitney service.
Yeah.
And I'm also interested in the clear space, if there's any.
Okay, there's no clear space, but we'll call you for the shuttle. Thank you, Gary. Jan. Tom Evans, did you come on?
Yes, but I don't desire to speak. Thank you.
Which topics do you want to speak on, Tom?
On this one, I'm behind. I'm just going to be mostly listening, and I'm not sure which.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Well then, if there's no objections, we'll make those amendments in a red line version for the next regular voting meeting. And we should be able to consider adoption of a resolution to go to public hearing. Is that right, Glenn?
Yes, I'll have that prepared.
And then the next steps after that would be to set a public hearing, of course, for our February regular meeting.
Right.
That should give us the time. All righty. With that, we'll go to the next item of old business. Thank you very much. The next item of old business is what I call ground floor area number 2, gross floor area number 2. And that is the discussed draft ordinance amending chapter 270 zoning of the city code, adding a definition of underground parking area in section 270-4 definitions by addressing underground parking. This topic may include discussion of other zoning code sections, including section 270-21 relating to floor area ratio and section 270-30 relating to parking spaces. let's use the same format for discussion. Glenn, if you would start by a brief synopsis of how we got there, and then reiterate your disclaimer on the omission of some of the FEMA information, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mayor. So this ordinance also grew somewhat out of Board of Adjustment hearings in which variances were granted permitting underground parking to be, or underground parking areas to be excluded from gross floor area calculations. As you know, gross floor area, as gross floor area increases, so do our off-street parking requirements. But the board granted variances citing their feeling that requiring additional parking to have off-street parking underground didn't seem to make sense. So this ordinance seeks to remove underground parking as one of those things that drives up the off-street parking requirement. So we exclude off-street, or we exclude underground parking from gross floor area in this ordinance. One of the main things that's changed in it is the definition of underground parking area at line 53. I kept looking at that definition that we had previously, and it just didn't seem that like it had much clarity. So I tried to clarify it somewhat by making it simpler. However, I'm not sure that even this definition entirely meets the mark, and I'll explain why in a minute. So the definition currently says for underground parking area, an area containing one or more parking spaces and travel lanes used for the parking or movement of vehicles entirely below the undisturbed ground level. The thing I'm struggling with on that definition is, we talked about what is underground and do we have definitions? So we do have a definition in our code of undisturbed ground level. That definition is ground at its natural elevation and ground the level of which has not been disturbed by excavation or fill. So it's intended to be ground at its natural occurrence. And obviously, whenever an underground parking garage is built, you're going to have excavation and fill and whatever takes place. So I think it works if there's a way of identifying what is the undisturbed ground level before the project starts. And so long as the ground level remains at that level, then we know what is underground parking. But I'm still wrestling with whether that's the best definition we can get to. The rest of it is largely, as you saw last time we met on this ordinance, where it specifically lists those sorts of uses and the fact that it's, certain uses are exclusive of underground parking. So it goes through and takes out any parking requirements or any increased parking requirements for areas that are provided for underground parking. I'm not sure if that's a great synopsis of it, and as I said earlier, the FEMA stuff has been all taken out, not because we think that there's not more that can be done on FEMA, but because Dennis is the subject matter expert for the city. Dr. Trejos obviously is knowledgeable in this area as well, but they couldn't come to a resolution, at least not so far, as to what kind of enhancements would be appropriate to include in this ordinance. So we removed them entirely. As I said earlier, hoping to advance this ordinance rather than having it stalled for the FEMA improvements, which really weren't part of this initiative when it got started.
Did Dennis Jenny come on board at all?
He's not on, but I believe he is waiting in case you need him.
Okay, so I just wanted to offer him the opportunity to speak. If not, then we'll go to the commissioners. Again, this is a zoning change. So we've got to go through the process of adopting a resolution at a regular voting meeting to go to public hearing. And then a month later, we would, at a next regular meeting, we would conduct the public hearing, and then we could consider a vote at that time. I want to make sure that we're happy with this version. And Glenn did mention something about the definition. I kind of focus on the word entirely below, so that if we know if we need to further define what entirely is. And then Glenn, you mentioned undisturbed ground level. So it sounds like we have just a little homework to do in that areas possibly. Commissioner Gossett?
Yes, thank you very much. Glenn, I do agree with your kind of hesitation there on one thing. And in talking with Building Code Forum with regards to this, the undisturbed ground, the suggestion that came out and is apparent in other municipal codes, that is the underground, undisturbed ground surface as confirmed by a soil compaction test. So the issue with there is that if you have a blank spot, if you will, there's nothing there, and you bring soil in to level it or what have you, that changes the level. So it could be confirmed by a soil compaction test at the original level, so that you're not just artificially raising the level of the ground to in fact create additional underground space. So that's a possibility. I can send you some additional information on that about confirming with a soil compaction test of the original level of the ground. Also,
can I ask a question about that? I'm sorry
Sure.
for interrupting, but on that topic, I still sometimes I've been asking myself, what is the commissioner's goal? I mean, does it really matter that for example, if the groundwater table requires that the underground parking can't be entirely underground unless the site is raised, the ground level of the site is raised by 1.5 feet, should that be something that precludes the credit for underground parking? If a developer needs to go up 1.5 feet, but still has parking under that ground level, that raised ground level, should that be excluded still, as this ordinance, is talking about underground parking? Or if the ground level goes higher, is that an automatic disqualification? Because I mean, personally, I sort of feel as though as long as the cars are off the street, under the building, and the building still doesn't exceed the height limit, you as commissioners have achieved something that is beneficial to the city. So I'm not sure that an additional 1 or 1.5 feet raised ground level should make a difference, and it might make the definition easier. If we're not so worried about not an inch of movement of the the existing ground level, then maybe the definition is easier. But I don't know if that's something that's consequential to the commissioners or not.
I think, the question is, what are we trying to solve? And I agree with that. The object of this, I think, is to get traffic or parking off the street and under commercial buildings for density issues. But as long as that does not then impact if you will, Board of Adjustments appeal or something of that nature of, I need to go higher because of the base flood level. So I don't know if we can make those two exclusively or mutually exclusive, so that the height level is always maintained at that aspect. But yes, you're right. The goal, I believe, is to have the density issue addressed with underground parking for commercial buildings. So however we get there, I would support going in that direction. But again, I don't want to have an impact on the adjustment, if you will, or Board of Adjustment viewing height changes because of the impact that I have to, raise the ground level 1.5 feet because of flood implications. So it still needs some adjustment there, I guess. And if you and I want to work on that, or you want to do some further research, I would agree to that. But again, the focus in my mind, or the goal, is to lessen the density on the streets by putting underground parking, making it available and not including in the gross floor area.
So what if you removed the word undisturbed and just said entirely below the ground level or the ground surface? I think you used the word surface. And then we don't worry about whether it's disturbed or undisturbed, so long as the parking is entirely below whatever the resulting ground level is, it's excluded. That doesn't address your concern about Board of Adjustment and how would maybe the Board of Adjustment view an applicant who says, I'm trying to do underground parking, the city wants underground parking, but I can only do it, if I raise the level of the ground this high, which means I need a little bit more height. That could obviously happen. I'm not sure of a mechanism to particularly deal with the possibility of a variance request that relates somehow to this. But I do think that if you're able to get away from trying to figure out what is the existing ground level and has it been disturbed or not disturbed, it seems to me that that's less of a concern than is, can we get cars off the streets and under commercial developments?
I would agree with that conversation. I do believe if you exclude or remove that undisturbed ground level or surface would be cleaner. But I think if we should give a little more thought to the aspect of then hardship because of height limitations or what have you in commercial developments. So
I guess I think that we're close enough at this point that you all could probably go to a public hearing, but I want a definition that's pretty close to where you're going to land before that happens. And I think it'd be nice to be able to have these public hearings coincide. And if we're going to a public hearing on the previous ordinance we discussed, to get this one to a public hearing at the same time would make sense because they both relate in some ways to gross floor area.
We've got Commissioners Calusi and Legree would like to talk. Commissioner Calusi?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I have a different take on this. Yes, we want to have parking off the street as much as possible. And the idea that it needs to be completely underground, I'm not sure I feel that strongly about completely. Ideally, yes. But again, the city solicitor talked about the possibility of, groundwater issues. And so maybe we could allow, X number of feet above the ground if it's screened in some way. I don't know necessarily why we have to have it completely underground, but if you are going to be, let's say, 3 feet above, then perhaps that could be screened. So that would be the way I would like to see it. And as far as the Board of Adjustment and folks who are looking to go above our height limit, I don't know how many times the Board of Adjustment have heard cases like that where they've allowed someone to go above the height level. It's been pretty much, we've really not allowed that as far as I know. Maybe Building and Licensing can correct me on that, but that's really how I would like to see this.
So Tom Evans is actually, he's listening and he's did 20 years of Board of Adjustment, so he probably could offer some input on that. I can't remember many, if any, instances where the Board of Adjustment granted variances for height. Perhaps they've granted variances for mechanical equipment and those sorts of things that are on roofs, but I don't remember an actual extension of the height limitation for the entire structure. So you would like to see the definition basically say, so long as the parking is under the building, it can go above the ground surface so long as that extension above the ground surface up to some limit is screened.
That's correct. That's how I would like to see it.
I understand your suggestion there in that regards. The counterpart to that, if you will, though, I think to try to support commercial retail in the city, that if we do a partially screened, or if you have only a portion of the parking exposed, then that prohibits any commercial or retail space being built in that area. Example would be the Avenue Inn, it is Avenue Inn. That may not be the Avenue Inn, I'm sorry, but the parking that is on Wilmington Avenue across from Chesapeake, or rather Henlope and Oyster House. There is open parking that is underneath of the hotel rooms that are on the second floor. So again, it is fully exposed, not partially exposed. But again, that really prohibits commercial space from appearing there in retail space.
Well, not not necessarily. I mean, if you're talking about, I know exactly which lot you're talking about, but if you're only talking about, 3 or 4 feet, perhaps you have steps going to the second level there because you'll have screening and perhaps you have steps and maybe a long balcony across the front. I'm not sure, but I don't think that that's necessarily precludes the idea that, I could be wrong about that, but it seems to me you could have just simply have steps going up to a commercial property.
Glenn, I want to make sure that our watchers understand that what we're talking about in this ordinance is not restricting where subsurface parking can go or be. What we're talking about is what triggers the calculations being in the gross floor area, correct?
That's right. This ordinance would exclude underground parking from the definition of gross floor area. It would therefore not, it would end the practice of basically holding it against somebody who, I didn't describe it well earlier. I'm struggling to describe it now. The way the ordinance works, the way our code currently works is that instances where underground parking is included in a project, that underground parking area counts as part of your gross floor area. And because it counts as part of your gross floor area, it increases your off-street parking requirements. So you almost get penalized for having underground off-street parking because it drives up your additional parking requirements. So this, you're right, it does not define where you can or cannot do subsurface parking. It merely is trying to recognize that someone attempting to implement underground parking shouldn't be penalized and have a higher off-street parking requirement because of it.
Thank you. We got Commissioner Legree, and then we'll go to the public. Mr. Evans wants to speak. Go ahead, Commissioner Legree.
I'm lost, but are we talking about undisturbed versus disturbed as a remedy for being too close to the ground, to the water level, to groundwater? You get the parking area up high enough so that they would avoid a FEMA penalty, or am I just going off in the wrong direction?
No, you're more sophisticated than me. I didn't get that far. This is simply the definition currently is I'm struggling with how do we define what is underground parking, and is it just below the surface of the ground, wherever the surface of the ground is after the project is complete, or is it under some pre-existing undisturbed ground level? So the discussion about the floods, the floodplain, and all of that was more directed at, depending on how we define underground parking, will that somehow provide a loophole of sorts for people to go to the Board of Adjustment and say, I can't do underground parking because of the groundwater level, and therefore I need a variance for height. That really wasn't part of my consideration when I developed this definition. I'm only trying to define underground parking in a way that the building official can read this definition and look at a set of plans and say either yes, this is underground parking, or no, it isn't.
Yeah, I'm still stuck on disturbed versus undisturbed, and I'm assuming that the reason you want to make that definition is because of the problem with building a multi-story building on top of undisturbed or disturbed soil. And I would think that we would need a soil engineer to tell us whether they could go up with that or not. And I don't think it matters whether it's virgin undisturbed, because a good soil engineer can compact soil so that you could build 40 stories up if you wanted to, but only they know how that works. And I hesitate for us to try to put that in our definition other than just referring it out to an expert. And I think I've missed all the points. So
no, I tend to agree with you. The reason I use the term undisturbed ground level is because that's actually a defined term in our zoning code, undisturbed ground level. But as I said earlier, I'm hesitating on the use of the word undisturbed because I think it creates more problems probably than it helps. And
Bingo.
yeah,
Bingo.
I'm leaning toward probably striking undisturbed and then just dealing with, either it's all under the ground surface or there's some allowance for it to come above the ground surface so long as it's screened as Commissioner Calusi suggested.
Precisely. And as long as an engineer signs off on it, that you can build on that.
Right.
I agree.
Commissioner Byrne?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I think this discussion is now going in a direction that at least is making sense to me. And I come back to what Commissioner Calusi talked about and what the solicitor just commented on to provide some allowance. If one of the major goals here is to get cars off the street and be able to provide for that, then we need to, within our code, provide an incentive for the commercial building to be able to do that. And so if it's strictly this undisturbed land, I think we're removing perhaps in some geographic locations some of the incentive to do that. And so I think we do need to figure out how we provide some leeway to go above the ground level that still is acceptable, that's screened, that's fits the decorum that we want in our commercial areas. So I think to provide some allowance for that then supports the goal that we're talking about wanting to achieve, and that is to get the cars off the street.
Thank you, Dick. We'll go, let's go to the public. Tom Evans.
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Tom. Thank you.
Let me take you back to the beginning because what I'm hearing now, well, I'll answer a couple of questions and I'm going to walk you back to where this whole discussion began because I'm hearing a completely different set of arguments. And I don't think you should be going anywhere until you sort this out because several things, one of them may have changed that I'm not aware of. Let's just talk about building height, not the garages, because that also affects the garage in some way. Standardly, unless it's changed in the code, building height is determined from the middle of the street in front of it. That's the benchmark. We had a secondary goal to maintain commercial businesses, not necessarily hotel space, but commercial businesses as much as possible in our commercial zone, including the Boardwalk, Rehoboth Avenue, and Wilmington Avenue at least. That's mostly the commercial all the way down. Anything you do that raises a building and a garage and therefore not have street level access to the building reduces commercial space that is functional and will be able to make a living. If you believe if you can believe that 2 or 3 stairs doesn't affect that, go look at the restaurant business below the Himmelpen Hotel on the Boardwalk, which has been an abysmal failure, even with all the variances they could possibly get, because there are 3 steps, 4 steps from the Boardwalk up into the restaurant or whatever business is there. It doesn't work. People do not go upstairs from streets very much to go into a business. They'd rather have their doors open so you can fall in the door. So I think that you're saying, let's make it easier for them to have parking. It's required for hotels to have parking. That's our requirement, period. So do we want to be a town that has a bunch of hotels and no other commercial enterprises in our commercial districts? I don't think so. And that's what you'll see if you continue down this road towards lifting the limits completely. I think where Glenn began this conversation is where it should be, which is he was just trying to define where the top of the garage was, period. I would tell you, number one, if we had a completely flat city, I'd say at the level of the sidewalk in front of the building. We don't have a level city. If you're trying to build a hotel on Wilmington Avenue in the dip, that's going to be an odd area because it's not a flat sidewalk. But for most of our city, what you're looking for, Glenn, is to have the top of the garage level be at the elevation of the sidewalk in front of it. If it's everything is level, or the boardwalk and the sidewalk. undisturbed soil means nothing in this matter. I mean, in my mind, what you're trying to shoot for is that you could have a business that the doorway opens onto the sidewalk. Anything other than that is favoring hotels over other commercial enterprises in the city of Rehoboth. And you're picking winners and you're picking losers. Either way, by the way. So that's my 2 cents on that. And by the way, no, we have not, in commercial, we've never given any, that I'm aware of in 25 years, variances for height for hotels. Or any business in, I'm going to take a caveat, I haven't looked through all my brain cells right now, but I can't think of any height issues that ever came before Board of Adjustment in commercial, plenty in residential. And most of those were in places where it was the measurement from the center of the street was the issue. And that was the only variances over on Park Avenue, Oak Avenue more than any place else. We gave 3 or 4 because of that fact that they were on a hill. There's a sand dune on that side and the houses were sitting up literally 5 feet in the air, Glenn, something like that.
Yeah, that's right. I remember now. Yeah.
It's oak, 22 oak, 24 oak, 26 oak. There's going to be another one over there coming to Board of Adjustment soon because they're tearing down one of the old cottages over there. So they're going to have to deal with the same thing. But it doesn't work to say, because there's hills. We have a slight bellying out on Wilmington Avenue, but other than that, in my mind, we're trying to require hotels to continue to have the required parking, build a hotel. That's the rule. That gets the cars off the street. If they have flooding in their basement, they need to deal with it by having a pump. That's their deal. And that also allows us to have businesses on the first level. If they want to have hotel rooms, they can try. But if you look on Baltimore Avenue, some people have tried to put hotel rooms on the first level. They don't rent out. I'm going to tell you that right now, nearly as much. So the trend for the city is to design a commercial district that works. And it works as a diversified commercial enterprise. And so I really take exception at people saying, you know, let's make it easier for hotels to get their parking. How many more hotels can the city support? And how much more room is there on the beach? So I'm not anti-hotel. I'm not pro-hotel. I'm pro-balanced commercial development. And I don't hear a single person right now on the mayor and commissioners talking about having a broad view towards the commercial development of our city. You're picking winners and losers. That's my 2 cents, guys, and I'll be very interested to see what you come up with, and I'll have a lot more to say later because I haven't studied this until I came on 10 minutes late, and there's a lot to dig into.
Thank you, Tom. We've got Commissioner Gossett, Calusi, and Gay that would like to speak. Commissioner Gossett?
Yeah, just a comment to go along with Tom there. I'm trying to take the broader view in that regards with the discussion of screened parking allowed. I think if you remember in public comments and letters to the editor, et cetera, about the Bellhaven project, one of the negatives that people felt was that having parking on the first level was totally eliminating retail space along the boardwalk and the first block of Wilmington and also Rehoboth Avenues. So again, doing partial screening of parking as opposed to exclusively underground, you're gonna have the same problem. Is you're going to have a blank wall of half exposed automobiles or vehicles, and again, you're basically killing any opportunity for retail space there. And I think if you'd also talk to the retail operations on the second floor of First Street Station, they're not real happy about being on the second floor of First Street Station, about getting up and down on the elevators or the stairwells or what have you. And having to use the elevators there for the past few years, they're really not the most secure and clean aspects of First Street Station. They function, but you kind of take your life in your hands when you go in there sometimes, I feel like. So again, having retail on the ground level is the preferred space for any retail operation. And I think that's what we should be promoting as opposed to screen parking. The goal again is to get the density of the building reduced with the aspect of putting parking underground. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Calusi? You're muted.
Muted.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. I mean, I appreciate what Tom had to say, and I think that's absolutely true. That definitely it's preferable for businesses to be on street level or ground floor where you walk from the sidewalk directly into the business. But I will point out Harry K's on the boardwalk. What they did was design a first floor businesses, and then there's parking behind it underneath that building. And what there is there's a back door also into the business. So what they've done is they've put commercial that is right opens up to the boardwalk, yet there's parking behind those businesses in a lot. So, I mean, I would agree that maybe just screening it all the way around doesn't make sense, but there's potential, I guess, if you are on the boardwalk to have businesses directly on the boardwalk, but yet have parking. So I don't know. It seems to me that the hotels would make the decision, because I'm assuming that the income that they get from renting out space to retail or restaurants, they would try to maximize that. So I don't know. I guess I'm just looking at some flexibility that might make some sense, but it's just my 2 cents on this. But I do agree that I'm sure most anybody who would be renting space for retail or a restaurant would prefer a ground floor entrance. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, first of all, I feel a bit of deja vu here, because I think we had this whole discussion about what we wanted the commercial district to look like, and we didn't want a wall, at the boardwalk, and we wanted businesses to be at ground level, and the comparison to First Street Station. So the comments that, I'm not going to repeat them, but the comments that Tom Evans have just made and that Patrick have just made are exactly what we talked about before. And, it's the reason that we wanted the underground parking exclusion to be for fully underground. So, I don't know really why we're going back on that. That wasn't what I raised my hand to talk about. When I first got this revised ordinance and saw how drastically different it was with the concepts of measuring subsurface water table and what we now have is the FEMA base flood elevation. And I did talk to Dennis about it, and if he's here, perhaps he could explain so everyone can understand the way he explained it to me, that we're protected because the base flood elevation will always be, I guess, the most conservative measure, and that will protect us from, from having any parking in a flood zone. However, we all know that those maps are out of date, which is what I think Dr. Trejos was getting at with the other measurements he was proposing. And when I went back and looked at the last version of the ordinance that we had in October, there are several rationales in the whereas clauses that make me wonder, well, what now? And that is, it says municipalities are having to establish more rigorous requirements than those established by FEMA due to the FEMA flood elevations being inaccurate. It also says that FEMA has not properly taken climate change into consideration in the current FEMA floodplain. And it also talks about our flood insurance policies, and it says that we should take such other official action reasonably necessary to carry out the objectives of the program. So I believe what Dennis told me is that the place to do that is not necessarily in this ordinance about underground parking, because we do have the base flood elevation as the determinant, but that perhaps we need to look at other code changes to address that. So I don't know if, and I'm prepared for that. I just think we have to do it sooner than later, or else we may have a problem here.
Is Dennis on the line?
He has not joined.
I'm afraid not. Okay. Thank you, Susan. With that, we'll go back to Tom Evans.
I'd like to comment on what Pat Caluzzi said. That's the Star of the Sea. It's a condominium. The businesses on the ground level are not required to have any parking whatsoever. They do have a half a step up, so you can make an argument that a half a step is not too much. They took care of that with some nice board walking. It may not even be a step anymore, it may be an incline. And I'm not aware that the parking behind the Star of the Sea is for anybody other than residents of the condominium. So I don't know what Pat was talking about.
Well, I mean, it's simply just, to me, it's just parking. If it was a hotel, would it be different than if it were condos with parking behind there? Just an observation. I mean, I think the majority of commissioners are wanting, at least I'm gathering, that they want it completely below ground. And I'm certainly, if we think that that is best for the city, I'm certainly not opposed to it.
Thank you. Let me double check. There are, Dr. Trejos, are you there by any chance? Okay, he indicated, he's a doctor, and he indicated he had rounds and might not likely not be able to participate, but he did sign up. We have nobody else that wants to talk on this topic. Need some guidance on how to move forward. If you recall, this is a zoning issue. Like the others, the next step, if we were ready to go to public hearing, would be to adopt a resolution to go to public hearing. The earliest that could be done would be January 15th. And then the hearing date would be set on February 19th, where a vote could be conducted at that meeting or subsequent to that meeting. I do not feel obligated at all to hold this public hearing concurrent with gross floor area #1 public hearing. I would rather get it right so that we have the outcome that we desire for this one. So I would seek direction from the commissioners, Commissioner Gossett, and then Sharon Lynn, please.
I'll let City Manager go first.
Thank you. I just, Mayor, wanted to, Dennis is on the line if you need him.
Okay. Does anybody have specific, if Dennis wants to comment, let us know, Sharon. Otherwise, Susan Gay, I believe, articulated the best she could.
Okay.
But Dennis does it much better than me. So if we want to have clarification of both about the base flood elevation for giving us all the protection we need, that's one thing. The second thing is, do we need more ordinances in the future to cover other issues?
Do you want to comment, Dennis?
Dennis is not in the meeting. I'm not sure I'm trying to get him in right now.
All right, Patrick, do you want to comment? And we'll see if Dennis can get on later.
Just for further clarification on the definition, Solicitor, we say an area containing one or more parking spaces and travel lanes used for the parking or movement, etc. Trying to be consistent in the code. If I look back to section 270:30, size of parking spaces, ingress and egress and maintenance, which I think these two sort of have to fall hand in hand with, if I'm thinking through this correctly. In that section of the code, we don't speak of anything of nature of underground parking or parking spaces, but we do refer to garages, public lots, private lots, and garages. So I wondered if we could explore the opportunity of, in the definition, to say an area containing one or more parking spaces and travel lanes used as a lot or garage, the insertion of those words, as a lot or garage for the parking or movement. That way it does refer back to 270:30 in using those same phrases of garage and parking lot, both public and private. Again, just trying to interpret connections there. I don't know if that's appropriate or not.
That seems to make sense to me. I don't have any immediate objection. I think it's probably a good edit.
And then additionally, also under lines 91, 92, 93, in section 3 there, we talk about 270:35, and section number, if we go, there's 4, 6, and then 7. Section 5 refers to medical, dental, and legal offices less than 10,000 square feet in size, no spaces required and then over 10,000 square feet in size is same as number 4, which you referred to there. Just help me through why that section was not included in the revised ordinance.
I'll have to look at it here. I think building and licensing gave me these specific edits or these specific call outs. So let me look for a second. 270 35D4.
Yeah, 5 actually, 4, 5, 6.
5, right. So over 10,000 square feet, it says same as 4 above. So in 4 above, this edit in the ordinance would exclude underground parking spaces. So you'd have number 5 would effectively say that if you're less than 10,000 square feet, you have no spaces required. If you're above 10,000 square feet, no, it would be exclusive of underground parking areas because you refer back to number 4.
Refer back to number 4. Okay.
Right.
And then also, just curious, in 270.21 lot coverage, we do refer to the phrase underground parking under use. And it says 100% of gross area provided that no parts of the parking structure except access ways are above sidewalk level or above the undisturbed ground level of adjacent properties. So does that's the only place that our code that I found that the phrase underground parking. And it then has somewhat of a, I won't say a definition, but it just talks about how that to be applied. Again, that's lot coverage 270-21.
Where in 270.21C and then what portion?
Under use, all the way down,
Yeah.
permanent residential, mid-rise, hotel, motel, all other commercial, and then underground parking.
Yeah.
Dennis, are you on now?
Yes, I am. Okay, so would you like me to talk about the BFE and requirements?
Yes, we would, please.
Okay, so originally when I received the proposal from Dr. Treos, took a look at it and thought, hey, great, he wants to be more restrictive in the flood zone. This is good for the city. After further review and conferring with my associates at FEMA and DENREC, I realized that it really wasn't more stringent than what we've already adopted as the BFE. When you look at subsurface water tables, they are always below ground. The base flood elevation is going to always be above ground, especially on the coastal area. So say you have a base flood elevation that's been established by FEMA at 10 feet. That 10 feet is taken from the mean sea level, which means that could be 6 feet above ground or 8 feet above ground, but it's never going to be below ground. So to enact an ordinance that would have the base or the subsurface water levels establish the building requirement, that would not be good. It would actually be cause for our withdrawal from the National Flood Insurance Program. So I will say that FEMA would be the first one to tell you that their maps aren't most accurate. However, when they were developed, they used all the historical data, hydrologic, all the science available at that time. So it is the best starting point for developing, the base flood elevation and where the city needs to develop their building code to. Now, if we want to be more stringent regarding building in the flood zone and with garages, the best course of action would be to look at including things such as more than 1 foot of freeboard, not building garages in the flood zone, stuff like that. And one thing to keep in mind, as Commissioner Gay had mentioned, the future. So right now, FEMA does not include sea level rise in their establishment of base flood elevations. It's something that they're looking into. However, that could be years down the road. I've read a report that shows that currently we have about 5% of our city property, the property within the city is in the special flood hazard area. With the sea level rise in about 2040, by 2045, we're looking at having about 17% of the property within the city limits in a special flood hazard area. So as she's mentioned, now would be the time to look at developing code to be more stringent instead of waiting. Anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate you coming on board. Sharon Lynn, your hand's still up, and Patrick, your hand's still up. Do you have anything more to say?
I'm good, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Patrick, your hand's down.
Yeah, I just continue with if Glenn had a response on that lot coverage aspect, if we need to address that or not.
Yeah, so what that's saying is that for underground parking as it's defined there, at least, and I think that this might be helpful to our definition, as far as lot coverage goes, you can build to the entire gross area. That parking, underground parking area can be in 100% of the gross area. So, but I like the way that it says, and this goes back to Tom Evans' comments and back to the use of the undisturbed ground level definition, because here it says 100% of the gross area. So 100% of the gross area of the lot can be used as underground parking. And then it says, provided that no parts of the parking structure except access ways are above the sidewalk level or above the undisturbed ground level of adjacent properties. So that might help in our definition to the extent, if the commissioners don't go with a version that allows for some portion of the structure to be above ground level, so long as it's screened. If you go with a purely underground, completely underground definition, our definition could then say an area containing one or more parking spaces and travel lanes used as a lot or garage for the parking or moving of vehicles, where no part of the lot or garage except access ways are above sidewalk level or above the undisturbed ground level of adjacent properties. So then it kind of flows together. I hadn't seen this part under lot coverage, and I think it's helpful to our definition if you go with a version that's entirely underground, nothing extending above the ground or the sidewalk level.
Which I would totally support in that sense, because again, I think that increases and encourages street level retail, which is where your most dollar per square foot retail space is available, as opposed to a couple of steps up or on the second floor. And I think in a long range plan, that's what we're trying to encourage in the city of Rehoboth Beach, and also with the redesign of Baltimore and Wilmington's, to take this into consideration when looking at streetscape redesign. That this would be very helpful.
It seems we've got varying perspectives on what the objective or goals of this ordinance change is. And I appreciate Tom Evans enlightening us. I agree with you, Patrick, that we should try to preserve retail space on the first floor. We've got Commissioner Legree. You're muted.
Adjacent properties is a showstopper, and maybe that's what we want to do. It makes a lot of sense. So
I'm sorry. Start again. Say that. What's a showstopper?
Adjacent properties. That means you can't. That means you can't bring in soil and compact it. Even if all the engineers in Sussex County say that you've compacted it adequately to build a structure on it. So that pretty much takes away any option of adjusting your water table, the level of how high you are above the water table for any property, as long as you're adjacent, as long as the adjacent property has an undisturbed level that's different.
Thank you. Commissioner Sernowski?
Yeah, Mayor, I just want to say that I'm fully in support of it being completely below the surface. And it is for the reason of having retail space at ground level. You know, I go back and I think about the Avenue Inn. I think that was probably the most recent hotel that was built. You know, they had to pump out the water table below them for months. It was a lengthy and expensive process, but they did it, and it turned out to be a great addition to the town and looks fantastic. So that's what I'm in favor of forward. I've never been a fan of having any part of the below parking visible from the street. So that's where I'd like to see us go.
Thank you, Ed. And Commissioner Gay?
I just want to add one little thing. First of all, I'm glad to hear that, and I think for all the reasons we've articulated, we don't want to have parking show above ground. However, there is another very important reason that we haven't named, and that is ADA compliance. But it would make that very difficult to have any kind of retail where steps are involved. So I just don't want us to lose sight of that as well as we go about streetscape planning, especially.
Anything else? Anything else? Oh, go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, just to add one thing, just to be clear, you could still do underground, or you could still do parking below a commercial structure that extends above the ground surface. You just won't get the credit that this is basically providing if you go entirely below ground. So this incentivizes developers to do everything they can to get it all entirely below ground so that they get the credit.
So that could be another zoning code approach if we wanted to go that route. Well, Glenn, this falls on you to try to bring this to a head because you're going to be the one trying to tweak it. Can you summarize maybe what you've been hearing or ask the right questions to solicit what you need to move forward?
Well, it seems to me that the consensus that's been expressed, and I know it's not universally shared, but it seems like more of the commissioners are seemingly in favor of entirely below ground option to be able to keep retail at the ground level on the first floor. So I think the definition that I read a moment ago is probably the closest to what I've been hearing. So let me read it again, because this is the definition I propose to add to the ordinance so that at your regular meeting, you can consider whether it's ready for a public hearing or not. So the definition would say underground parking area, an area containing one or more parking spaces and travel lanes used as a lot or garage for the parking or movement of motor vehicles where no part of the lot or garage except access ways are above sidewalk level or above the undisturbed ground level of adjacent properties. So that's the definition I propose. It seems most consistent with what I've heard the commissioners express. Is there agreement that I should amend the ordinance or create the next draft of the ordinance with that definition for your consideration at the regular meeting?
I would support that.
I would as well.
Yeah, I can support that.
Yes.
Shall we do that? And if you would have a resolution available in case we decide to, if there's minor changes, I don't mind then going forward consideration of a resolution to go to public hearing. If there were significant changes, there's still debate up, then we would have to decide whether we go forward. But with that, any other questions? Well, thank you. Thank you, Dennis, for participating remotely. Appreciate it. With that, we'll end this topic and we'll go to next item of old business is discuss program for wireless communications facilities and possible amendments to section 270-46.1.2 of the zoning code relative to final recommendations presented by the city manager. Again, folks, this is a zoning issue. The wireless section is within the zoning code. And so to make any amendments, we would go through the same process we just talked about for gross floor area. And that is that we would vote on a resolution to go to public hearing, and then at a subsequent meeting after it's been noticed, conduct a public hearing and thereby after consider the amendments to the thing. Glenn, if you would once again use the same protocol and give us a quick reiteration or synopsis of how we got here. And then I'll turn it over to you and Sharon to articulate what this latest version is, being mindful that we've been through many iterations and recommendations and discussions among the members of the Environment Committee as well as the Planning Commission members. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mayor. So that's exactly right. This started with recommendations from the Environment Committee. Those recommendations were reviewed by the city manager with assistance by the Cohen Law Group, with assistance by me. That resulted in the city manager preparing a recommendation report based upon the Environment Committee's recommendations. She whittled some of them down to the ones that she thought most appropriate and most important to include in an ordinance change. After the city commissioners looked at her recommendations, you referred it to the Planning Commission, who reviewed the recommendations. The Planning Commission offered 2 additions to the city manager's recommendations. The city manager agreed with the Planning Commission's proposal. So that's what resulted in the final recommendations. And those final recommendations have now been put into ordinance form. I can go through the final recommendations of the city manager as amended by the Planning Commission and show you where each of those recommendations show up in the proposed ordinance, if that's helpful, or we can go right to questions. What's your pleasure, Mayor? You sound muffled.
Unmute, Stan.
You got me back. Let's go through the last iteration of the city manager's recommendations. If you recall, there was a lengthy list of recommendations that she addressed and said some recommended no action would be taken and others specific action would be taken. So if we could go through those recommendations of which actions were recommended and then give us a reference to where to find those in the document of December 28th.
Perfect.
That would be helpful, I believe.
So I'll only address the recommendations where the city manager proposed that some action be taken. So the first one where that first occurs, remember there's 2 parts to the recommendation report. So part 1 has 5 recommendations. Let's do those first. And the first of those that she recommended action is part 1, recommendation number 3, where city manager recommended that the city should consider requiring that the provider recertify every 4 years and additionally recertify whenever modifications are made or equipment is replaced. Then she also recommended the city should further consider requiring that each application include 3D modeling of radio frequency emissions for each proposed site. So in the ordinance that's been prepared, if you look at section 1 that starts on line 42, then down in line 55 where the underlining starts is where the new additions would be made. That section says proof of compliance shall include 3D modeling of radio frequency emissions from each proposed antenna and shall include the cumulative emissions level of all antennas at the site. The WCF applicant shall submit a signed document to the city recertifying compliance with all applicable standards and regulations of the FCC once every 4 years and within 10 days of any modification or replacement. So that recommendation shows up first in that section. It also shows up in section 3 of the ordinance. The same language that I just read to you is repeated at line 91. And the reason it's repeated there, and it's going to be repeated one more time, is that in our wireless communications facilities ordinance, there's 3 categories. There's tower-based, there's non-tower-based, and there's small wireless facilities. So this shows up 3 times because we wanted to be sure that we capture this requirement for all types of wireless communication facilities applications. The third place that it shows up is in section 5 of the ordinance. If you go to line number 163, you'll see the same language repeated requiring certification. So that was the first recommendation the city manager made, and those are the areas where it shows up in the ordinance. The next one that she recommended action on is in part 1 of her report. It's recommendation number 4. There she says the city should consider requiring notice to all residents within 200 feet of the location where a permit application has been submitted to the city. She also says the city should further consider requiring that each applicant be required to post signage at a proposed site within 5 days applying for a WCF with the application number and context for additional information. So those requirements that she proposed show up at section 2 of the ordinance at lines 68 through 74, where it says notice within 5 days of submission. I won't read it all, but it recites that the property has to be posted and that the owners within 200 feet will be notified. Again, it shows up 2 other locations to make sure we hit all 3 applications of small or of wireless communications facilities. So it shows up again in section 4 of the ordinance at line 103. And then it shows up again in section 5 of the ordinance at line 118. The next action that the city manager recommended is in part 1 of her report, and it's recommendation number 5, where she proposed that the city should consider posting all applications to the city website. That shows up in the ordinance at section 2. If you look at line 75, it says the city shall post notice of all applications on its website within 5 days of receipt of a complete application. And then it shows up again in section 5 at line 125, I'm sorry, line 124, the city shall post notice of all applications on its website within 5 days of receipt of a complete application. That's the website posting requirement. Part 2 of the city manager's report, recommendation report, her first recommendation under that section, which is recommendation number 1 of part 2, she recommended that the city should consider requiring a report certifying compliance with emission standards. That shows up in the ordinance at section 1 at line 54 is the certification requirement. Then it shows up again in section 3, starting at line 91, and again at section 5, starting at line 163. In her recommendation report under part 2, again, recommendation number 2, she recommends that the city should consider posting all applications to the city website and should consider requiring the applicant to submit all antennas currently identified for deployment in the city. The first part of that, we already went through the website reporting requirement, but requiring the to submit all the location of all the antennas. This is one that the Planning Commission also felt that whatever plans that a utility company has for deploying community wireless facilities, those should be disclosed at the time of application. So that shows up in the ordinance at section 2. That's the website posting in section 2. Let me look for, so section 5F of the ordinance, section 5, then subsection F provides map required. An application for a small WCF shall include a map clearly showing all existing wireless communication facilities in the city that are owned by the wireless communications facilities applicant and any sites that have been identified for future wireless communications facilities installations at the time of the application. This map shall be held as confidential proprietary information by the city. So that's the map. So where there are known proposed locations that maybe the application hasn't been submitted yet, but the applicant expects to submit those applications at some future time, there's a requirement that those locations be identified at the time of any application. Then again, under part 2 of the city manager recommendation report, recommendation number 3 says that the city should consider requiring a report detailing the cumulative emission levels of all antennas at the site. That again shows up 3 locations in the ordinance, in section 1, in section 3, and in section 5K. Just to read one of those sections, section 1. Proof of compliance shall include 3D modeling of radio frequency emissions from each proposed antenna and shall include the cumulative emissions levels of all antennas at the site. So that's where the city manager's recommendation 3 under part 2 shows up in the ordinance. Then moving to recommendation number 7 under part 2, the city should consider requiring as a component of the application drawings to scale showing all structures, residential dwellings, essential utilities, and all in the fall line of the proposed wireless communications facility. That shows up in the ordinance at section 5. It's at subsection E of 5, line 128. It says an applicant for a small WCF shall include drawings to scale clearly depicting all proposed antennas, accessory equipment, and wireless support structures, as well as all existing structures, residential dwellings, and essential utilities that are located in the fall zone of the proposed small wireless communications facility. Then finally, recommendation number 9 in part 2 is that the applicant provide a listing of all other feasible alternative site locations. The city manager originally suggested that no action be taken on this one. The planning commission recommended that action be taken, but that the applicant need only show other feasible locations that are within 100 feet of the proposed location. So that recommendation was implemented in the ordinance at section 5, subsection G, which starts at line 139. It says alternative locations. Any application for a small WCF shall include a list of all other feasible locations within a 100-foot radius of the proposed site where the proposed small WCF may be located. So that's where the report got implemented into the proposed ordinance. Any questions that I can assist with?
Any questions for Glenn?
Yeah, just to clarify, Glenn, because we raised this back some weeks ago, and I think I understood your response, but all of this applies to non-tower or temporary installations. Is that correct?
So the mapping requirement and the things that you see that appear in section 5 of the ordinance, the map required, the alternative locations, the drawings required, those all appear under the small wireless communications facilities portion of the ordinance. Everything else applies to tower and non-tower. The tower and non-tower based applications, those are the applications that aren't the run-of-the-mill type applications, and already under the ordinance they get special scrutiny by the city manager. So there's a separate process for those. I think what we're mainly concerned about are the small wireless communication facilities, which are the applications we're seeing now that are on the boardwalk, along Rehoboth Avenue, in the residential districts. And those are the ones that I think are generating the most concern. So we were sure to get all the detailed requirements of mapping and other feasible locations into that section of the ordinance. So while most of these recommendations apply across the board, the more detailed ones apply to small wireless communications facilities, because those are the ones that seem to be flying a little bit under the radar. The other ones, the tower and non-tower based already get special scrutiny.
Okay, very good. Thank you. That's very helpful to me.
Commissioner LaGree?
Glenn, have you passed on this, and has the Cohen Group passed on this? I see that you are the author, one of the authors. Are we good to go forward with this, or is everybody okay?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I would just comment, thank you, Glenn, for your concise explanation here. But I would say that we've been in discussion, many months about this. I don't know if AT&T or Verizon are on at this point, but I did hear from Bonnie Metz from Verizon, and she did advise me that they are good to go unless, the holiday season, they weren't in touch with their attorney, but they appeared to be okay. So I think we're set.
Yeah, I concur with that.
I'm not concerned with AT&T or Verizon. I'm concerned with Glenn and Mr. Roberts. If they're good, I think every time we've talked about this, we've made it better. And the definition, the defining that we've done today, in answer to Dick's question, is that's all helpful. We're talking the meat of the program are small cell facilities and equipment. So and that's what's going to concern us going forward. We're not going to care all that much about the big towers on top of the Henlopen or the water tower. They'll be okay. We can live with those. It's the towers that are going to, or it's the accessories that are going to be on every street corner and every 300 feet on the boardwalk and forward from there. And circuit made it tough, but I think you guys have wedged as much out of it as we can get at this point. And so I congratulate you on the work that you've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, then the next step would be the public hearing, right? Because this is a zoning.
Well, the next step would be for us to vote to go to public hearing,
Right.
and then conduct the public hearing and consider. Yes, ma'am.
Because I wondered if we could have some photos at that public hearing, both of what these towers are going to look like and maybe a map showing ones that have been approved so far. I just think the public would find that useful.
So I think Kevin Williams has some materials that he might be able to share. I've seen a map that kind of lays out where they currently exist within the city that he's shared previously. So that might be one piece. I'm not sure that if he has some just stock drawings of what a small wireless communication facility typically looks like or not.
Well, or even a photo from another location that's been put up by Verizon or AT&T in the recently. I think it's critical to see what that looks like. I've seen one recently that frankly I was a little horrified by, but perhaps that's not what ours will look like. And I just think that's a discussion. First of all, a picture is worth 1,000 words, as we all know. So I just like to see what they're actually going to look like.
Sure. Thank you. We can do that. I have a few particulars I'd like to go over real quick, and that's lines 59 to 60. Whenever I see time constraints in here, I'm try to create an awareness of the impact and workload of our city staff. This is something that once every 4 years, something has to happen. So somebody in City Hall has to keep track of it. On lines 68, 69, it indicates that the vendor has to submit an application and then within 5 days, give notice. But again, there's an impact on city staff to pull those addresses and get them to them in a certain time constraint. Line 76, the city shall notice all applications on its website within 5 days. Again, I'm trying to create an awareness that the workload of our staff slowly creeps up over the years. On line 108, it indicates the notice of notice required. The notice shall include the application number and contact information for additional information. Who are they directing the public to? Is that the applicant's contact information, or is that the city's contact information?
My expectation is that it's unfortunately going to be the city who will refer them to the particular applicant if there's a question that the city can't answer, but I think it anticipates a number at the city that can be called.
Okay, well then I'm just gonna reiterate what I've said multiple times, is that we can't give people false hope. We have to have some kind of standard response for them to indicate that we likely will not have the power to change anything. Again, I just say that. On lines 128 to 131, it just says drawings required. It brought to mind aesthetics. You know, one of the things that's very important to us is aesthetics. Very important to the Beach and Boardwalk Committee is aesthetics on the boardwalk. And maybe Kevin Williams can answer, or you also, but where does it says we have control of aesthetics? You know, in other words, somebody presents a design for an antenna that looks like Medusa. We should have the right to say that's not acceptable. But where in the code does it say we have that right?
So the ordinance itself, the existing ordinance, speaks to the use of stealth technology, for example. So you're required to, as best possible, make it blend with the existing, facility or pole or whatever you're using. In addition to that, there's the design guidelines that also try to address aesthetics as much as possible. So there are a few instances throughout this ordinance that focus on the aesthetic aspect. And as you know, certain applications, such as on the boardwalk, are required to get a secondary level of review by the city manager.
So we've got some of the tools available already.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
And at least right now, Mayor, if I may, the carriers are aware that Rehoboth, the city wants the same as far as aesthetics are concerned. And I think that, as Glenn said, will carry through in the future for what's cited in the ordinance and the design.
Thank you. Lines 133 to 137 indicates that a map is required. I know I recall members of the public indicating that they would like to see all future proposed locations. And I just want to give an awareness here that the map shall be held as confidential proprietary information. So it's really not going to help the public as much as they desired, but just want to make a note. And is that sufficient, that wording sufficient to thwart a FOIA request for such information?
That's the intent of it. The build out, to the extent they have a build out, and from my understanding is that it's limited because it ebbs and flows given the demand for wireless. But in conversations we've had with the carriers, that is information that they consider proprietary, that they hold very close to the vest. And if one carrier has another carrier's build out plan, that can give a competitive advantage. So I do think it's sufficient that we'd be able to maintain it as confidential, even given a FOIA request.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. I echo Commissioner Legree's compliments on you all coming to this set of proposed amendments. Commissioner, somebody just took their hand down. Any other comments?
Yeah,
Commissioner Legree?
I do. Our ordinance only mentions stealth technology, I believe, in 2 different places. And we don't have a really good definition of what, I had the exact same questions that you have, Mayor. well, what is stealth technology and what can we do? The Ninth Circuit left that fairly wide open. And I'm thinking that as time goes on, there'll be more and more cities step into that area and do a lot more definition. So, and I believe the telecommunication companies will try hard to work with the cities to make an aesthetically, you can't say pleasing for crying out loud, but you can say acceptable, an aesthetically acceptable solution. So that's going to be an evolving topic, and I'm just anxious to see what other cities do. I have quite a few photographs, and I also have the URL for Newark's contract. They put their whole contract online, and there are a lot of great photographs in that Newark contract. Now that contract was with Singular, and I think it was co-signed by AT&T. The person who's online with AT&T probably can tell us, and they're probably very familiar with that contract. But they have drawings, they have a lot of photographs. It's just a very well done document. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll get to the public in a few minutes. Commissioner Byrne?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So speaking on behalf of the Environment Committee, I just want to genuinely thank the city manager and her team, the solicitor, and all of you as my colleagues for taking this all so seriously, having numerous iterative kinds of discussions to the point that it sounds like we're ready to move this along to the public. And I just think it speaks well in the spirit of transparency of our city government and where we're going with all of this in terms of the spirit of public awareness and the spirit of public safety, that it's important that we move this ahead. And I think knowing full well that, you know, the next 24 to 48 months, we may be revisiting some of this because it is a changing situation, and that's just the reality of it. So Environment Committee is very appreciative of everyone putting their hands into this and working as a team and moving it ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner. And if you would give our thanks back to the members that some I know committed an immense amount of time to this topic, and we appreciate everybody's input. Thank you very much. With that, I'd like to go to the public. We'll see if anybody from the wireless community is here. Is Bonnie Metz online?
No one from Verizon or AT&T has joined.
Verizon, AT&T, so that's Bonnie Metz, Megan Riley, Andrew Peterson, and Joseph Death. Okay, so with that, I don't have any
Frank
other
Cooper would like to speak.
wanted to talk about it. Who?
Frank Cooper, I'd like to quick comment if I could.
Okay, go ahead, Frank.
I'd like to offer a compromise on the submission of a future sites plan being available to the public. Apparently, the future sites would be proprietary information and would be, you know, out of range of FOIA. But I don't know why that the rest of the information, the proposed contracts, would be lumped together with that. And it seems to me there should be two separate filings there. One that is just the future, and one of, you know, and one of actual applications that would be available to the public. That's all.
I can appreciate that. So what Mr. Cooper is saying is that the applicant shouldn't be able to keep an application location proprietary just because they put it on one map that is shared with all the future potential build outs. So he would like a separate map that shows where the applicant is proposing to put this current wireless communication facility, and then a separate map that shows all potential future locations, so that if somebody comes in and says, I'd like to see application number XYZ, where that proposal, is going to be within the city. We can provide a map that it shows that single application, and that seems appropriate to me.
I think that's an excellent idea, and I would request that you make that change, whether it's to maps plural required, and then you identify 2 maps, but only the second map for future WCF installations would be held as confidential proprietary information. There's no reason all the other maps would be confidential. In fact, we have location maps now that have been shared publicly.
Right.
Would you make that change? Any objections among the commissioners?
That's a great idea.
Thank you, Frank. Great idea. Thank you. With that, are we ready to consider going to a public hearing? Consider that at our regular January 15th meeting. I hear of no objections. We will do that and set the public hearing for February 19th. Thank you very much for all your hard work, everybody. Appreciate it. With that, we'll go to our next item of old business, and that's discuss the fats, oil, grease, and solid waste ordinance amendments related to continuation of stormwater analysis program, focusing on chapter 162, food and food establishments, section 162-38 to 162-42, grease interceptors, and chapter 227, solid waste, sections 227-1 to 227-29, refuse containers, rules and regulations, sidewalks and boardwalk, garbage and refuse collection, and storage of refuse. If you'll notice that we are looking ourselves at 2 documents prepared, and they are embedded in the agenda for your viewing pleasure. With that, I'm not sure who to go to introduce this subject, Glenn or Dennis?
So I could give a little bit, but I really think Dennis, he's done the heavy lifting here, and I think he probably can describe the ordinance better than I'd be able to if he's available.
Yep, I'm online.
Thanks, Dennis.
Go ahead, Glenn, you'll go first, and then we'll let Dennis fill in the blanks.
Actually, Dennis, can you just go over the grease interceptors ordinance first? Let's do that one first, I think, and then we'll go to the solid waste one.
Okay. Pardon me, I'm trying to bring up the grease interceptor ordinance.
Sorry about that. If you want to do the other one first, I don't think it makes much difference.
Okay. Oh, I've got it up. All right. So the grease interceptor ordinance proposal changes. As you have noted in the past, our current code for grease interceptors really didn't have much meat to it or bite to it. These proposed changes actually give us a way to, a stronger way to enforce grease and other discharge being introduced into our stormwater system, or not stormwater system, but our sewer system. You have to use my cough here. So if you look through it, you'll see a lot of good changes. One of them is making sure they keep some proper record keeping with all details. In the past, when we would go to inspect, we don't inspect the actual traps. I mean, we'll look at them, but we don't dig into them or anything like that. But in the past, we were going to look to see if they're keeping records. A lot of the times, most of them are just showing us receipts of when a business came and cleaned up the trap. So with this new requirement, it's got a lot of details to it, and it holds the businesses more accountable. One of the good things you'll see in section 16240, letter E, one of the things we had problems in the past because we didn't have anything in the ordinance to enforce was these restaurants and other businesses cleaning grease mats and stuff outside, and you just watch this discharge, flow down into the street, down into the stormwater. With this, we have something to enforce.
Dennis, that's lines 99 to 102. I put a double star there. I think that is probably the most significant thing in here. So thank you.
Okay, line up, got it. Okay. All right, and then as with a lot of our ordinances that we've been changing this past couple of years as far as enforcement goes and penalties, we've changed it so that these violations will be civil assessments, which would make it easier for building and licensing to enforce, rather than calling on the police for somebody, spraying down a greasy mat. But this really does give us a lot of, like I said, meat and bite in order to make our sewage and stormwater systems a lot better. Anything anybody sees there that without a question about?
Any questions on just this section of the FOG grease interceptors? Commissioner LaGree? Unmute yourself.
Dennis, do you think that has been a major contributor to our higher fent levels on the Rehoboth Avenue, Maryland grab samples? They're always higher than the Grenoble place and the Laurel, and of course much higher than on South. Do you think
absolutely
that'll help us? I worry about those three in the middle of town.
Right, those are the biggest producers. I know Public Works could speak a little bit better to this than myself, but we see that Rehoboth Avenue especially is a big producer. The backsides, you can walk, if you walk down Baltimore, Wilmington, on the backsides of some of these restaurants and businesses, you can see the areas that are just not good. A lot of grease and just a lot of bad stuff. This will help us enforce keeping those areas clean as well. We've even seen people dumping mop buckets from, washing up their kitchen floors with mop buckets and dumping them outside, and watch them go down the sewer or stormwater drains.
Yeah. I'm with the mayor. The record keeping is, believe it or not, a big part of it. It just keeps everybody's attention focused. And it's great that what you and Kevin and your bunch has been doing. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, and now as far as the record keeping, we had previously developed a record that we handed out when we went around previously to educate the businesses and the restaurants. So we'll format that to meet all the specific requirements in here, and we'll get that out again as another educational event. And then thereafter, then we'll start having to fine and enforce this code.
Yeah, you bet. Codifying is great.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Commissioner Gossett.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. I really appreciate the thoroughness of this. And I've spoken to a couple of the restaurant owners and managers, and they find that this is not cumbersome on them at all, that many of their organizations that remove the fats and oils from them keep these records anyway. So it is not as onersome as it might seem. Just a couple of quick questions. In line 21 there and 22, you struck the date May 1st, 1999. Is that just to state that going forward that all restaurants are defined that must have grease interceptors? Is that the way to approach this?
Yeah, we struck that because that in the original code when it was developed, it was telling all the restaurants that you needed to have this done by such a date. So now everyone has their grease interceptors in place. So from here on out, if it's a new business or somebody converting a restaurant or whatnot, anybody who does not have one and is going to open a new business that requires one, it just states that, yes, you need to have that.
So are you confident that all, because we have 104 food establishments holding valid licenses in the city currently, and are you confident that all 104 of those have grease interceptors currently?
I am, yes.
Okay.
As you mentioned, we've been out and we've inspected all the businesses and restaurants.
And then just a clarification for this on lines 39 there, it says food processing or food service facilities that are newly proposed or constructed or existing facilities which will be expanded or renovated to include a food service facility where such facility did not previously exist. Does that have any correlation to a new permit of compliance, either issued by the commission or an administratively by the city manager? I'm just trying to think if there's any opportunity that there is an existing food service facility that is out there that doesn't comply, but you feel confident that all of them currently do?
Yes, I do.
And the only other question or comment that I have is line 51, a restaurant or business at his expense, if you could change his to their expense.
I agree to that, yes.
Okay, thank you. And a great job, really.
Commissioner Stranowski.
Thanks, Mayor. Dennis, thank you. You've done a fantastic job and have been very diligent in putting this together. I just want to make sure that this is essentially effective immediately when adopted, that that you do have a communication education plan, that day one we're not slapping people with fines, that there's going to be a period where we're educating people and getting them up to speed on the changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always operated that way. I'd rather educate first and foremost instead of just going and finding someone. That's not what we're about. I'm working with the other code enforcement officer, Mr. Rothstein, in developing a plan to get this information out to all the businesses. It'll be most likely, like we've done in the past with everything else, is doing a face-to-face visit and just visiting the businesses.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for Dennis? If not, I would, let me see. We have no members of the public signed up to talk about this topic, so we'll move on to the next one, and that is ordinance to amend the solid waste chapter and the sections notified. Dennis, if you could continue talking about how we got here and then explain some of your changes, then we'll do the same process. Thank you.
Sure. We got to this with a recommendation from Ms. File, who looked at a bunch of our ordinances to kind of bring us more up to date current times. So you'll see that, one of the items, I'm trying to scroll here and find it. Like I said, we're trying to update. Of course, again, violations and penalties, we've updated that to from misdemeanors to civil citations and fines. One of the items I'm looking for is the garbage to be wrapped in line number 160. This is outdated. Pretty much anybody's putting garbage out in a can is already in a bag or whatnot. And not to mention, it's not really something that's real easy to enforce. We certainly can't be just going around looking at garbage cans all the time, looking for wrapped garbage. So this to me made sense. But other than that, it's just basically updating to what we've got. Under the sidewalks and boardwalks, line item number 263. Well, from, let's say, go up to line 261. We always said, the sidewalks, adjacent to the establishment, but someone had brought to my attention and thought it was a good idea to state, any adjacent area. So that can cover, the side of a business or a food establishment. And then looking, especially this year, I know it might have been a little more COVID related, a lot more people here in town later in the year. We had some decent weather, but line 263, changing the times for them to sweep out around the areas and establishments, I suggested extending it to October 10th, where we still got more people. When we do have Sea Witch come back again, we're looking at more businesses staying open, past that September 30th. So the October 10th was a good idea. Maybe a good compromise. And those are like the highlights. And then again, with the garbage and refuse collection, down again with violations and penalties section, starting line 373, we again change that as well to be civil citation. Any line item anybody has a question about?
Well, let me start off if you don't mind. I think you've done a great job. I've always been a nitpicker, and there are some things that I'll send to you and Glenn that are just very, very minor. Sometimes I have trouble with specificity. If we talk about a metal container, well, why not a plastic or metal container? We're talking about a 4-yard waste container. Why not a 2-yard? So sometimes I have trouble with specificity. So I'll send you a note on that.
Okay.
But, the changing the dates for cleaning sidewalks outside businesses, I'd prefer and suggest that we go to October 31st for all locations in here, because you'll notice that on line 263, you go from September 30th to October 10th. But on line 271 and 275, you stick with September 30th. I've learned over the years that consistency is very important and desired. So again, I'd rather go to October 31st. That way it does include Sea Witch weekend in there. And I think we're getting busy enough where we could almost go into November or something. Again, this is for businesses that are open. Not all are maybe open at that time of year. And all it's doing is asking them to contribute to cleaning up their section of sidewalk outside their business. Again, I've got some very small things I'll send to you and Glenn. I think you did a great job. As a reminder to everybody, this is not in the zoning code. So if at the end of this conversation, everybody's fine with it, we can make any small edits for our regular January meeting on the 15th. And at that time, also consider adoption of those changes. Commissioner Gossett?
Yeah, to continue that conversation a little bit about the dates, I'm just curious as to why we would just not remove the dates altogether. Because if we could just, like on line 263, just end with opening of such establishments for business. If the business is open, I would certainly hope that they would sweep their streets or wash their streets in compliance. I don't think that, to be honest with you, dirt doesn't take a holiday. So, if the business is open, I think they would have personnel in order to sweep or wash those streets, both in that section A and section B. Just a thought process there.
I like that very much, Patrick. If you think about some of our businesses out there that have carry-out windows, and one day of operation in the summer, it can be equal to almost to one day in the off season as far as the amount of debris left on the sidewalks. I think that's a good recommendation. Anybody else? Commissioner Gay, please.
Yeah, this is a question for Dennis. I remember I asked you about this before, and I honestly don't remember what you told me, but is there a place or a need to require that compost be in containers? I have had a few questions and complaints about compost piles that are out in the open attracting rodents, and I just don't remember what you told me about that.
Sure. I personally have never received a complaint about compost within the city limits. I had done some research, and there are some municipalities out there that have compost code. But at this point, I haven't seen anything or heard anything really that's forced me to really look into it heavier and think about establishing a code for that. But it certainly is something that we can look at if you'd like.
Well, I mean, when I asked about it, and initially it wasn't you, I asked somebody else in building licensing about it. It wasn't you, and I was simply told that we didn't have anything there was nothing in our code to prevent it. Period. The end. And you know, it was a problem. I mean, I've only heard about it in one place, frankly, but it was a huge problem there, and there was nothing we could do. I guess the other piece I would add to that is that the bins are offered for sale. I mean, it was DNREC or something offers the bins at a discounted price or something, you know, a few times a year. So there's like incentives out there for people to do it this way. And there seems to be an expectation in a lot of places, because I'm aware of it being a rule in other cities as well. So again, it's just I don't know whether that's a trend, whether it's something we should address rather before we have a problem, just to be proactive about it, since the bins are readily available. It's just a question.
I would say, Commissioner Gay, that that should be addressed perhaps in another section, maybe for the commissioners to look at, not necessarily here. But okay. I do think it's a good idea.
Okay, thanks.
I think we can put that on our radar for future discussion, but not interfere with moving forward with this. I would like to make note that I'll go to the public for public comment shortly. And we've still got a question on the table, if you will, is what dates do we want to have for cleaning the sidewalks? Do we want to leave it as is, go to October 10th, October 31st, or go year round? So I appreciate some more input on that. So maybe we can resolve that before the next meeting. We've got Commissioner Byrne, Legree, and Gossett on the in line.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just in quick response to your question a moment ago, I like the way that Commissioner Gossett talked about this in terms of year-round, if the business is open, or at least for all of those months that a business is open, that they should take this responsibility. I raised my hand because I wanted to ask Dennis about the dumpster situation in the alleyway between Rehoboth Avenue and Christian. Now, this has come up periodically the last several years, that those dumpsters are not hidden away. They're often out in the alleyway. They're clearly, well, the smell and the looks of them is often, particularly in the warmer weather, not attractive at all. Is that covered in here, Dennis?
It's the dumpsters and the securing and the basically screening of the dumpsters. That's covered in the zoning code. As far as leachate and stuff like that, that is covered. But when we talk about that alleyway, that extension of Wilmington Avenue, that's a tough one to crack. It's, I mean, to have one of those existing businesses enclose their dumpsters, there's just no room. I know we've looked at it. We've looked at different options, maybe even using some of city property over there, where we can have a communal area with a few dumpsters for all those business back there. I think there is a way to tackle that, but we just need to look into it further and do some more research.
Gentlemen, let me interject here that you might recall a few months ago, I brought up the desire to look at license agreements. And specifically, we would target the whole town, but we would also focus on Martin's Lawn or whatever that alley is called there. And at the same time, Commissioner Byrne, I would intend to look at the screening of trash throughout the town as well as in that alley. So it will come up again. It may come up as early as February. So it is on my radar.
It's good to hear that because we have a number of people that continuously bring it up, and it is an ongoing issue. Thank you.
So we're going to be doing some homework in
Great.
February, probably March at the latest. We'll get to it.
If I can relate it to that, you should know that I worked with Dennis and Matt on looking at a solution for that alley, or what is known as Wilmington Extended, actually. So we do have some information of how, and I have talked to all of the restaurant owners there about what they agree to, a communal type of area that could be screened. So we do have more information that we can share when it's time.
Yeah, I'd like to defer the conversation further until we get to the point where we can actually post it on an agenda. And I know you've done research. Thank you very much. With that, we'll go to Commissioner Legree.
Dennis, on line number 393, this may not be the appropriate place, but could we include after the contains any, the word animal and then or, and then human fecal matter? I don't think any enteric fecal matter needs to go into our stormwater.
Yeah, I see no problem with that. You put on the list along with the mayor's list of items that you'd like to see addressed.
Well, the mayor and I have both been to Ocean City, Maryland, and we've talked to those people down there, and we know what kind of problems they face. So, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Commissioner Gossett?
Yeah, just a couple of little things. And I will also send these to you, Dennis. Line 62, recyclables. We define it as any material, group of materials that can be collected and or sold or used for recycling. Since Delaware Solid Waste is the one that really is responsible for recycling, do you think it would be appropriate to say any materials or group of materials that can be collected as defined by Delaware Solid Waste Authority?
That's a good point. Definitely, let's take a look at that.
Okay. And then the other question I have is line 150 and 157. We said depositing rubbish in public places and depositing rubbish in private property. In our definitions, we do not define the word rubbish, but we could use the word refuse, which we do define. So your thoughts on just saying depositing refuse in public places and depositing refuse in private property?
We could go that way, or we could add the definition for rubbish. Rubbish does have a definition in an International Property Maintenance Code. That we could use that verbiage.
Well, whichever you feel more appropriate. I just trying to be consistent, or so we have something to reference back to.
What line was that? I'm sorry.
150.
Thanks.
150 and 157.
Thanks.
And the other thing on line 320, and this kind of may fall into some further conversations later in the meeting, but it says residential garbage and refuse collection by the city shall be supervised by the city manager. I would suggest perhaps saying residential garbage and refuse collection by the city shall be overseen by the city manager or their designee.
Okay, that sounds reasonable.
And a question in the chart there that we have, or schedule of fees, lines, I guess it's after line page 10, we have use of condominiums, rental units, and single-family dwellings, but they're all the same price. They're all the same fee. Do we have any knowledge of why it's broken out like that, or do we need to break it out like that?
That I would have to defer to Jean Lee, who keeps track of that information. I didn't deal with the costs, those rates.
It just seems like it's all the same rate, so I don't know why we would have to break it out. Just again, a little less administrative work possibly, but if you could follow up on that, I would appreciate that.
Okay.
And that's all the nitpicks, as the mayor says, that I have.
Okay.
Very good. Anybody else? So we need to send any comments to Glenn and Dennis as soon as possible, so that they can be incorporated into any change. I would like any changes made at this point forward to be colorized, so that we can identify what is updated from today's version dated December 28th. And I will put that on the agenda for consideration of a vote. However, we will be able to decide at that point if the changes are too extensive from this version and we want to wait one more time, then we can do that. But I fully expect that the changes are minor, and we would be able to vote on it at that point. Tom, let's go to the members of the public. Tom indicated that he would like to say something on fog or waste.
Actually, my hand was up way back on the 5G and I didn't get called on, but I didn't make any hoots about it. I'll make one comment there and just one other on solid. Well, actually, I'm not interested in solid waste. Let me go back to the 5G just for one moment. We have to, as a city, we need to be very, very detailed and advanced in our thinking about this, because the lawyers in the communication industry are miles ahead of us. They have planned this out so well that they will snooker every city that is not smart enough to tie in with cities that have already figured out how to get the best they can get from what is required for us to do, because it's FCC. And they're fighting FCC, and they're trying to beat us up and win at the game. And they will do that if we don't get ahead. On the waste stuff, I have no comments except for city maps show the road behind the library as being Martin's Lane, published in 2012. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Anybody else? If not, I think we have our marching orders, and we'll go to take a 1-minute recess, and I'll be right back with you. Thank you very much. I'm ready to go back on the record. Did everybody else also take a break? As soon as we get Commissioners Paluzzi and Legree back, we'll resume. Thank you. I'm going to give them till 11:30 and then I'll start. Thank you. All righty, we're ready to resume. Thank you for letting me have that brief recess. The next thing of old business is discuss proposed charter amendments to section 17, city manager, and section 21, police force. To clarify that the city manager may delegate supervisory authority over city employees and city departments, including the beach patrol captain and the beach patrol, and to include any needed updates. If you recall at the last meeting when we talked about this, I think it was Commissioner Gossett, maybe some others brought up that, hey, there are additional edits to the charter that need to be considered. With that, Commissioner Gossett offered to take a look at additional edits. He only gave us those edits, distribute them to the mayor and commissioners at 8 a.m. And they have yet to be embedded in the agenda. And because of that fact that it has not been in front of the commissioners for a long enough time, it hadn't not at all been in front of the public. And because we have time constraints today, I'm making the executive decision that I'm going to postpone the discussion on the charter amendments to our special meeting. If you recall, our next special meeting for COVID is Tuesday, January 12th. I will add the charter discussion to that meeting so that we can have that support document out in advance of everybody, if that's all right. So with that, we will move on to the next item of old business is discuss interest in contracting for a one-year trial of Ride Freebie, presented originally as an intercity on-demand transportation program. You'll see in support documents, you've got the Ride Freebie presentation from November 16th, as well as a Mind Mixer survey. Mind Mixer is a survey generated by the city and put out on the website that presents different information. With that, Pat, I'll turn it over to you. You've been sponsoring this topic.
Thank you, Mayor. So, you know, as all of you know, because I'd sent an email to you, I was very disappointed in the Mind Mixer survey in the way it was worded. As you also know, at the end of the presentation, I talked about the fact that this would needed to be funded via grants, that we are in no position right now to spend that kind of money. So I'll repeat the question that was on Mind Mixer that says, are you in favor of the city funding a one-year pilot program from May to October to provide this free transit option at the cost of approximately $250,000? That's not what I was looking for with the Mind Mixer. I think a more appropriate question would have been, would you be interested in a pilot project such as Ride Freebie if it were funded by grants? Now, the other thing that I've just said to all of you, I wasn't necessarily looking at Ride Free being the answer to everything necessarily, because there are other vendors out there. One is Via, which is currently working with DART in the town of Georgetown. So we got some negative, a fair amount of negative responses, especially their letters, I believe 4 that we have in the agenda today, where they're very much against the city spending the $250,000. I am not looking for the city to fund this. But I do think that we've been talking about a jitney system for some time now, for years, and this was an attempt to look at some options. And in fact, the agenda item was looking for whether we want to move forward with something like this. I don't think we're even there yet. It was just introduced, and I have a transportation committee meeting this coming Thursday to discuss all of this. So in terms of what I think is appropriate at this point, I don't think it's appropriate to discuss moving forward with the pilot project, but I do think it's appropriate to continue to discuss pilot project in general to see what other companies have to offer us, as well as more detailed information. So there were some good comments and information from people. There was the question, how will you utilize this transit, or why won't you? So that was interesting, and most of the people said, you know, the city shouldn't spend the money, but there were a lot of other interesting comments, which I think are very useful. So as far as I'm open to what other people might want to suggest in this, but I still think we are early in the process.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. I know you're putting a lot of time in this. I appreciate your sponsorship of it. I don't know whether we've got the cart in front of the horse or not, but you know, here we are. We have a discussion on the agenda that you asked for, and yet I see on your next Street and Transportation Committee meeting, you've got shuttle on there to discuss. So I don't know whether you want us to stay quiet now and wait for the recommendations. I would suggest that before you invest too much more time in it, that my approach, I guess, would be, the first question would be beyond what we have now. Intracity and intercity transports with fixed routes, Jolly Trolley, Dart Bus, and then non-fixed routes, taxi, Uber, Lyft. Beyond those, do we want an additional transportation system run by the city in Rehoboth? To me, that's the first question. And that is absent any funding requirements. Get rid of that. Do we want an additional transportation city to augment Lyft, Uber, all these others that I mentioned, and to have it run by the city? That's the first question. Then if you say yes, then I think we have to talk about the funding mechanism there. And I know you mentioned possible grants, and of course the program mentioned advertising that could very well pay for it. And then for me, 3 is if we decide to go forward and find a funding mechanism, how do we choose a vendor? Because there are competing vendors for this also, obviously. And then beyond that, should the program be intracity only, or should it be also intercity? So I offer those 3 questions, starting with, do we need an additional transportation city, and what are the objectives and goals we would hope to achieve by running an additional transportation system? Commissioner Chernowski? Unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you. I agree with your approach on how you segmented out the questions and the purpose here. And I think the question, the first and foremost question is, do we want something? I'm still not sure. I would very much like to hear from, and I'm glad Commissioner Clusie has it on the agenda. I'd very much like to hear what the Streets and Transportation Committee has to say and hear their thoughts before us, not that we're wasting time, but spending too much more time talking about it. And I'm inclined to think that there could be some benefit if we partner with communities like Henlopen Acres, Canal Corcoran. I think that is going to be the most beneficial part of having something like that. So very much like to hear what the committee has to say first before we beat the horse too much more on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I've got Commissioner Gay and Commissioner Legree next. However, I would ask everybody, should we, because we know the Street and Transportation Committee is meeting within the next week, and would be able to report to us at the regular meeting? Yeah. Should we defer comment and allow them untainted discussion and analysis? I'll start. Commissioner Gay, your hand's up.
Well, yeah, I was going to actually say a little bit of both. I mean, I was going to suggest that we defer it. I had a couple of comments related to what Pat said about the survey, and just from the survey. If you think it will taint it by my saying them, I guess I'm willing to hold, but it's not very many comments. So
whatever your preference is.
Okay, because I mean, I do think it's something we should continue discussing, and it sounded to me, frankly, Mayor, from all the variables you just mentioned in your intro, that it's probably too many to sort out to have it in operation this year anyway, it would seem to me. So, I mean, I think we need to, I guess, take a longer view of it and certainly discuss it more. In terms of the survey, I'll just say that, for a long time, we wanted a survey mechanism and we didn't have one, and now we do, and it's pretty good. And so I don't want to think that it did not get us some valuable information just because the first question was about cost. because I think that wasn't the only question. And I think most of the written responses, the 22 pages worth of comments, a lot of those were about the use and not just the cost. And I thought it was very revealing. And as we saw, many people said they would not use it because Rehoboth is a walkable, bikeable 1 square mile town. However, some said they would. And, there were, in the written comments, 23 people said they would use it to go to restaurants and 12 said they would use it to go shopping. But if from all the things that we might want to do in the city, there's already a service that exists for this to meet this need. And what's interesting about it to me is it uses the exact same technology as the program we're being asked to either get grants funds for or fund, namely Uber and Lyft. And it may be that not everyone knows it exists. And maybe there's a service that, we or the, Main Street or the Chamber or the Homeowners Association could put the word out that, these services are because they're in the city and they're doing a very good job from what I understand, and people are willing to pay for it. But to me, in terms of the cost, whether we get a grant or don't get a grant, it's still taxpayer money. And I think the overriding sentiment in the survey was that tax dollars should not be used to pay for this. And in my mind, the issue is not about transportation in town anyway, that if you go back to look at the last CDP, yes, there is mention of a jitney service, but they specifically talk about it being to supplement an improved park and ride network. And they also talk about monitoring the number of cars that come into the city. There's the off-quoted line that the city can tolerate more people, it cannot tolerate more cars. So any solution needs to be in the greater city area, I think. And that's all I have for now.
Thank you. I'm going to reserve my comments till after we get a recommendation from the Street and Transportation Committee, further comments, but Commissioner Legree and then Byrne.
Yeah, I would like the committee to consider another aspect that we haven't talked about yet. And the telecommunications companies are blanketing us with 5G antennas. And if you'll go to Dewey, I have some photographs I took this weekend of high band 5G antenna arrays, Dewey, like the ones that are going to go on our boardwalk. And those are specifically for high amounts of data transmission. And that's what it takes for driverless cars. And they're going to be on us not too many years. So we're going to have a paradigm change in transportation about 5, 6, 7 years down the line. So we need to talk about that too. It's not here yet. By that time, I will be unable to drive because I'll be a really old codger. And I will be looking forward to a driverless car or driverless Uber or Lyft or somebody. So we're going to use it. We're going to need transportation. That's a fact. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Byrne?
Thank you. Two things. I think that this topic should go to the committee, and I assume and I'm hopeful that the committee will take a very broad view of it. And I'm not sure that they can conclude all of that in the first meeting. This committee has not met for a long time. And because we're limited in the amount of time that we can meet as virtual meetings, because it's a very complex topic and it should be dealt with in a very broad, kind of long view. It's probably going to take several months of discussion. I think that should be a reality. My second point is about the Mind Mixer survey. I agree that the Mind Mixer survey is a good concept for us. It's one that we want to continue. It has given us good data and information in the past. And I think that it can continue to do that in the future. But I think to Commissioner Calusi's specific points, the way survey questions are asked certainly can impact the results. And we just need to be very careful going forward that we don't build in bias to skew the results. And I don't think that was done intentionally. I think the people that are doing this out of the city manager's office have all of the best of intents, but it can't be done quickly and without a lot of thought. I mean, a simple twist of words in a survey changes the total tone of that survey, and therefore, drives a particular type of response often. So I think we should go ahead with Mind Mixer, but just be very careful and cautious in terms of how it's put together. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gossett?
Yeah, the only thing that I would certainly support, Mayor, your comments of goals and aspirations in that regards with this subject. And I would also ask that in doing that, that the Streets and Transportation Committee attach a timeline to that so that we know with a goal of perhaps January of 2022 for implementation, if that is where we come down to, that it's something that we want to do, so that we can market it appropriately, inform communities, inform state transportation, et cetera, but to attach some type of timeline to all of those goals so that we can keep moving forward with this in a timely manner, and that we can be able to inform the public of what is going on so that they can be aware and use it. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'd like to go to the members of the public that identified they would like to talk on this topic. Walter Brittingham, are you still there?
Comment.
No comment. Gary Glass, are you still on?
Yes, no comment.
No comment. We acknowledge your letter. Thank you very much. Tom Evans, did you want to talk on Ride Freebie?
Yep, I raised my hand again. Yes, the only thing I'd ask the committee to do, not to prejudge this, is to make sure they do an analysis of other communities like ours that have tried similar types of free to the citizen ride like this. Our winter residence is in Delray Beach, Florida. Delray Beach tried this 5 years ago. They gave up on it after 4 years because the costs were too great to the city. And they had advertising. So I would say any analysis from that committee that doesn't include a detailed look at how other cities have dealt with this and how it's been effective or how it's been costly to the city itself.
All right, thank you very much, Tom. So Pat, you've got kind of some marching orders. Why don't you go take it to the committee as you've already got on your agenda? And then rather than me picking a date like for the February workshop to have this back on, why don't you come to me and say you're ready to have it back on the agenda so we can receive your committee recommendations?
Okay, that sounds fine. And I did duly note it on the timeline from Commissioner Gossett and also Tom, your analysis of Lake Town. So, and of course, Mayor, your ideas as well. So we will move forward, and I'll be back in touch with you in terms of an appropriate time to put this on a future agenda.
Good. Thank you very much, Pat, for your efforts in this. With that, we'll close this topic. We'll go to new business, discuss nominations of committee members. We have Monique Buckles to serve on the Environment Committee as a voting member and Jeff Balk to serve on the Animal Issues Committee as a voting member. I would like to turn it over to Commissioner Dick Byrne, who chairs the Environmental Committee, to introduce his nomination for a new voting member.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thanks for the opportunity. Well, given the new rules that we adopted about a month ago regarding committee membership and voting and non-voting members, that left the Environment Committee with 4 voting members and 5 non-voting members, and we lost 2 voting members, meaning they were residents of the city. They decided not to continue. So we currently have 4 voting members and 5 non-voting members, and in order to get the voting members to an odd number, which was part of the new rules that we adopted, we went back to applications to the committee that came in the fall of 2019 as the committee was being formed. And therefore, I'm nominating Monique Buckles as a resident of the city to serve on the Environment Committee.
Good. Any questions? Very good. Thank you. And you also chair the Animal Issues Committee. You have a nomination.
I do, thank you. And so a similar situation with the Animal Issues Committee. There are currently 4 voting members and 1 non-voting member. And therefore, in order to increase that 4 voting members to an odd number, I have a nomination to make so that then we will have 5 voting members and 1 not voting member. Again, I went back to the applications that have come in over the last 2 years, and I'm pleased to nominate Jeff Balk as a local business owner in the city of Rehoboth Beach.
Very good. Any questions? If not, we'll put them on for consideration of approval for the committees at the January 15th meeting.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mayor, just one quick question,
Yes,
if I may.
yes.
For future committee nominees, would it be possible to have their applications embedded in the agenda when the nomination is made?
I need to turn to Glenn on that because I've understood that there's some proprietary information in there that is not shared. So to do that, could we, if that's true, Glenn, do we blacken out redact some of the information?
Yeah, I think that was the issue last time we looked at it, is that there were phone numbers and, mailing addresses and things that maybe the potential candidate wouldn't want shared. So, but I do think that, a fair amount of the information could be embedded just with some redactions, as you suggest. Sure.
Well, let's look into that then. There should be a way to redact the proprietary information then, because that would be a good idea, Patrick, to do that so that not just us, but all the members of the public can see who's being nominated. And we'll see. Maybe we can do that in the next starting with these 2 people. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody? Any further questions?
I was just going to ask her, can we do it this time? Can we do it for this? That's an excellent suggestion. In fact, it reminded me that when this subject had come up last year and Glenn had mentioned there were issues with some of the personal information, we talked then, I just didn't follow up with it, to have a 2-part application, to have a part that would be public and then the proprietary part, so that it would be simple to post one and not the other. And I think, I don't mind working on that, and I think we should still have that. But in the meantime, if we can do a redacted one, that would be very helpful.
Well, I just indicated that would be a goal, so
Great.
we will pursue that, absolutely. And starting with this group. Thank you. With that, I want to move on to the second item of new business, is discuss grant funding opportunities and process to seek grant funds. This is kind of a high-level discussion. I debated whether to just send a memo out, and I decided to do it in the public eyes. And I'm not going to name any particular grants because that's frankly some proprietary information. We do a good job with grants, and I'm not necessarily willing to share with other municipalities where we get some of our monies. But the main point of this is that we can't act solo when we seek grants money. Your committees, or as a commissioner, you can certainly seek what kinds of grants are available. But then what I'd like you to do is confer with me or Sharon or Evan to talk about the grant opportunities, because they have a better grasp of what's going on, what they've already asked for, what they've received in the past. And can fill out those grant applications better. In particular, I wanted to discuss about grant funding at the state level from our state legislatures. It's been mentioned over the years, many years, that somebody comes up with a project or a pet project, and that we should go to our state legislators and get money. The process needs to be that we need to talk in one unified voice. So what that means for me is that the mayor and the city manager are the only 2 that should approach our state legislators seeking grants, whether it's community transportation funds or whatever else. And that there needs to be a process in place before that we need to actually vet the projects and make sure that project, out of the numerous projects, rises to the level that we want to seek state legislators grants and funds to fund that particular project. Because there might be too many projects in the mix. You know, I mean, we've talked about different ones recently. We've even had, and I guess what threw up a caution flag to me is a member of a committee not too long ago who lives outside the town, but she's a member of the committee, indicated when they were talking about grant opportunities in the committee level that they knew Pete and Ernie and would go approach them seeking grants. And so the message here again is that we need to have a process to vet our grant requests and then solely go through the city manager and the mayor, who then might approach Evan to seek and solicit those grants. Are there any questions? Do you want to add anything, Sharon, or? Well, right now she's speechless. Does anybody else have any comment? Or what I would like you to do is for the chairs of committees to pass that on to your committee. You know, just that, again, we need to have a process and one unified voice. Sharon, we'll catch you next time. Thank you very much. Did you want to say anything?
Sorry, Mayor, I had a coughing fit. No, I think as long as we prioritize and have a process for this, it would be very helpful. We do know that we keep a running list of all grants, and you know, I myself, in being in contact with our state legislatures, it's often difficult to know who's been in contact with them prior to that. So it would be helpful to have a process, I would say.
Thank you very much. With Commissioner Legree?
Yeah, one of the best things that we can do is communicate among ourselves. We're all elected to our positions on the commission. And as elected officials, we have certain rights and obligations. However, communication is probably high among those attributes. At this year's audit committee meeting, Pam Baker, who's one of the managing partners of Barbicane and Thornton, remarked that Rehoboth Beach was one of the most successful grant acquiring communities that they deal with, and she was very complimentary. And I think getting grants is a teamwork situation, and we should all be a part of that. But we need to speak with one voice. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anybody else? If not, I'll turn to the next new item of new business, presentation and discussion on Dark Skies program to address light pollution emanating from the boardwalk. I imagine this could be applicable throughout the town, but this was a presentation made to the Beach and Boardwalk Committee recently. So I want to turn it over to Boardwalk and Beach Committee Chair, Commissioner Jay Legree, to give us an introduction and take it from there.
The Dark Sky people came to me, a month or two ago and suggested that the boardwalk was one of the big polluters. And darn it, they're right. If you stand out on the beach and look toward the town at night, you can't see anything because of the glow coming from the boardwalk. And so we asked them to come and talk to us. And they presented a very moving lecture on light pollution, light trespass, and glow and glare, and all of the attributes that we see every day, every night, and as we get older, more and more, without thinking about it. And I wanted to share with you what they talked to us about. And so with that. And we're working on the boardwalk. We're gonna, that's a topic of discussion. what we can do, what we can't do. We're working hard on that. And the boardwalk committee has some really good members who are diligent on this, and we've got all kinds of ideas, and we're going to go forward. But without further taking up their time, I want to present to you Frank Cooper, Jan Conacy, and Kate Merker, and with their presentation on Dark Sky for Rehoboth.
Thank you very much. Take it away.
Well, Frank, are you showing the PowerPoint?
I'm unable to start my video. The host denies my access, so I cannot until the host allows me.
Okay.
Okay. And then I can start to share my screen too. Okay, are you seeing my presentation yet?
Seeing a blank page, and it says Frank Cooper has started screen. Now we're
here it is, Frank.
Okay.
Here it is, Frank. Okay. Hi, I'm Jan Conacy, and what I wanted to do is just tell you why we're here today. Many of you recall that in 2010, as part of our CDP, we indicated that we thought Rehoboth had issues with light pollution, and we wanted to look at dark skies. They're environmentally responsible, outdoor lighting for us. Frank? We've just included one line from the CDP. If you go to the very end of your presentation, you'll see the whole section on dark skies from the CDP. We're feeling like any expenditures by the city of Rehoboth on outdoor lighting should be compliant with the requirements of the CDP. If we would like private owners and businesses to implement responsible lighting, then the city must lead the way by example. And what is light pollution? Frank is going to talk about light pollution.
Okay. The basic types that are noted by the Dark Skies Committee are sky glow, and we've all seen halos above urban areas in which the sky is lit up by the city.
I had to mute it.
I'm muted.
No, I can hear you, Frank.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's sky glow, and then there's glare, and that's when you're looking directly into a light, and we've all, of course, experienced this at one time or another. Light trespass is when the lights that you put on your building or outside your building or in the street or wherever invade another person's property, and it's kind of like noise. There is no way you can really prevent it from entering your home or your property. And also the amount of wasted energy from this type of light pollution, and Jan will go ahead and explain
Light pollution,
the financial and environmental damage.
About 30% of lighting worldwide is wasted light, shooting straight up into the sky. When we do the math, we guessed about $3.7 billion a year on wasted light, while adding 21 million tons of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere each year. We have ecological impacts too, and I think everybody here is aware that we do have turtles that come ashore in Rehoboth Beach, and the turtles come ashore and then the babies leave by where is the most light. Typically that was the moon shining on the ocean. That's not the case anymore. So we have animals getting lost because of artificial illumination. They're not sure which way to go when they need to go back to the sea. So that's there. Other birds are affected by artificial light. Melatonin, I don't know, I take melatonin every night to go to sleep because we all know that sleep deprivation causes obesity, causes depression, causes all kinds of other illnesses. And, you know, one of the things that we talked about at the Boardwalk Committee, almost everybody on the Boardwalk Committee had examples of how light, either if they lived on the boardwalk at the Henlopen or at the Star of the Sea,
how the boardwalk lights have impacted, the new lights have impacted their ability to enjoy their own residence. One man even said, it's a good thing my bedroom is in the back, because if it was in the front, I'd be in real trouble.
Okay, and I'm going to talk about color temperature, and this is a big factor nowadays because of the conversion from incandescent and arc lighting to LED lights, which are inherently blue in cast. And the color temperature is in temperature as it would be from a source emanating light. In other words, a filament at X temperature would give a yellower light, and it gets whiter and bluer as it gets hotter. And really, the healthy light for human beings is on the warm side, down near 2700 Kelvin. And this is not always the case with public lighting, with street lights and whatnot. But it should be. I mean, it's healthy for humans. It makes things look good. I mean, aesthetically, this makes human beings look better. It makes our faces look nicer and not pale. And it's generally a better color temperature, and it's available in LEDs, but it's kind of a newer technology. They're filtering the light now with yellow filters to change the color temperature, but some older stuff is really horrendously pale blue colors.
I think one of the things that we talked about, and that was a real eye opener to me, was the myth that more lighting is safer. And we hear that all the time from people in law enforcement. You know, they put, and even people in their homes, landscape architects are saying, you know, put these big LED lights all around. Of course, on our 50 by 100 lots, they're all shining into your neighbor's house. But this slide shows you that well-designed lighting is safer. So you can see with the bright light, you don't see the guy standing going to, coming in. But when you cover the light, you see the person. I think the next slide shows it even better.
Right. What you're seeing with this slide is the same effect that it has on the camera as your eye. When the iris of your eye detects bright light, it closes up and makes the surrounding areas darker. And so when the hand goes in front of that light, it allows the camera to see the darker areas lighter. And that's exactly what happens with the human eye. So the reality is that well-directed light is what you want, not just light blasting everywhere. And here's a very good visual example of what good lighting is and what bad lighting is. Unfortunately, our boardwalk is a great example of very bad lighting. I mean, they're attractive lights when you just look at them and they're not on, but the fact is that the light emanates from all directions virtually on them. So there's a lot of glare, there's sky glow from them, and as much light or more light is actually wasted than is used with those. And what we'd like to transition to is do the best, where we had lights that was downlight that lit up the boardwalk itself and the people on it and made it safe, but did not present glare when you walk down the boardwalk, and did not light the sky up, and doesn't shine on the houses and businesses that are adjacent to the boardwalk.
The next slide. Okay. We just talked here about the beauty of the night sky and how important that is. I always, like to refer to Wallops Island and the spaceships or the rockets that come over. When we go, when the one's coming, my husband and I go down to the beach, and you have to go down almost to the ocean to get a really good look at that rocket going over and up into the sky. And I know I ran into Pat and one evening, she was going down to look, I forget what kind, it was a harvest moon or a blue moon or something. But people in town, we're never alone on the beach looking up at the sky. But can you imagine where you can see your kids, can see the Milky Way when you go on the boardwalk? It just adds to the overall experience, and it enhances our charm and aligns with the original aesthetic of Rehoboth Beach. It's really important. it gives us that small town feel and that ability to enjoy the ocean, the beach, et cetera, at night, which we really can't do that much unless you're way down. We have had support from this proposal. The Rehoboth Beach Homeowners Association voted at their board meeting to support the proposal. And the Boardwalk Committee recommends to the mayor and commissioners that all lighting on the boardwalk be dark sky compliant. And we haven't had a chance to do a lot of publicity about this, so we're pleased with it, with the support that we have so far.
Yeah.
Frank, you want?
Okay.
So our next step is that we'd like to have the mayor and commissioners approve all lighting on the boardwalk be dark skies compliant. And I think, Frank, you have a picture of the 5G. Is that next?
Yeah, this is what was published as the proposed lights on the boardwalk. And essentially what it's doing is hanging, the poles, of course, will be replaced with poles that can accept the radio equipment. And they'll hang 5G antennas and put the current lights back on top. And while there may be an economy to that in some ways, it's really the worst possible solution. And the next slide, I've taken the liberty to modify this and show what the currently proposed light post antenna lamp assembly may serve Verizon's purposes, but it's the worst imaginable solution for our city. The antennas will be brightly illuminated by the lights directly above them. The light will project skyward, it'll project horizontally, but it will be shaded beneath the antennas. So it goes everywhere except where it's supposed to go. And I'm not sure if Verizon is financially responsible for new lights, but the boardwalk is our trademark. So it's not the place to cheap out in regards to who pays for this. In the short term, there may be a difference in fixtures on the boardwalk. In other words, the ones that have been replaced, the ones that have not. But in the long run, it's inevitable increase in numbers of the antennas, and it'll be imperative that this transition start correctly. In other words, that the ones we put up now are the ones that we're going to live with in the future, and they're going to replace the other lights with the same thing. So at the danger of having mixed lights at the time, it's worth it for the net result. And here I've got a picture of one that's in Newark, Delaware. This is a different, this is not a Verizon, this is a singular 5G pole. And you can see their antenna is a much smaller unit than we're going to have, but it's up above a gooseneck with a light shining down. And so this is roughly a more dark sky compliant design. But going back to this other design, the shaded area under this and the fact that it's going to light these antennas up, they're ugly. I mean, there's just no getting around it. They're designed to disperse radio signals, not to be looked at. And they're going to be brightly illuminated. They'll be right underneath the light. So this is just not a good solution for our city going forward.
And one of the points that we wanted to make is you don't have to change the poles that already been designed. You simply have to change the lighting on the poles.
Right.
So the poles can the poles that have already been designed, and I don't know.
Well, they've purchased. Yeah.
I don't know if they've been purchased, but these lights can be added to the existing poles so that the poles would blend along the boardwalk, and over time, all the lighting would blend because they could all be changed to this overhanging kind of globe lighting.
Right. And I really think that generally the aesthetics of this are very good for the city. I mean, the boardwalk is critically important, the way it looks, and this is the time to make that decision. I mean, now we are presented with changing these, and nobody was really thinking about changing these lights before, but it's time to get on track. I mean, this is the opportunity.
And we would like, our overall goal is we would love to be a dark sky community and be able to advertise it and stuff. but there are some costs involved, and we're saying we need to be dark sky compliant. That needs to be what we do first. And we need to let the utilities, Delmarva and others, know that we're a dark sky compliant town when they're looking at putting lighting in town. All of our street lighting should be dark sky compliant, but certainly the boardwalk is the place to start, and the timing is perfect right now. So we thank you. And does anybody have any questions, anything they want to ask?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Commissioner Legree, as chair of the boardwalk committee, have you presented recommendations from your committee to the Board of Commissioners on this topic?
No, I only heard about a few days ago that the lighting that we had anticipated on Rehoboth Avenue was not going to go forward. And I had, Kevin Williams had listened to our last meeting and said, you guys need to get working on this. And so we are. We've gotten some drawings already, and some of our members have gone out and taken photographs. And one member has even is Photoshop savvy, and she has designed some new lights. And so I think we've gotten some ideas, but we only started talking about this after the dark sky presentation at our last meeting, and our discussion only lasted 22 minutes. So there's a lot more to be said and done, but we are working on it hard.
Well, here's where I'm going with that. I understand you've got a meeting coming up where you're going to continue discussion of this. This presentation just indicated on one of its slides that the Boardwalk and Beach Committee recommends dark sky compliant lights. And my point is, I have not heard a formal recommendation coming from your committee yet. So
no, you haven't, and I included that in my report at the last meeting. If when I presented my agenda for this coming thing, what we're going to talk about. But no, we have not made a formal recommendation, and we probably can't. We may be able to after our meeting coming up in January, which is next Monday. But yeah, we want to go forward, and I said that in my report, and we're ready to make a formal recommendation. But I don't think we should recommend anything until we actually have some designs prepared. And right now we're flying blind. All we have right now is what you published in the Cape Gazette, and there are other ideas. Frank has a smooth pole. Well, maybe he doesn't. I have a smooth pole diagram that Newark's using, where they include the radios and the fixture and the meter all inside the post, which really helps streamline things. But it looks right now, and this may not be true, it looks right now like the gooseneck type attachment is probably the only and best way we can make our lights dark sky compliant. And that's a big step, and we need to all talk about that before we make that big step.
well, thank you, Commissioner. Frank, can you take down your presentation?
Sure.
And
Stan, I don't know if you can hear me. I have my hand raised.
Yeah.
Okay. What I wanted to say was that at the meeting that the commissioner, the boardwalk committee did vote to support the concept. They hadn't talked about particular types, only that we should have dark sky compliant lighting on the boardwalk. And I think that's what Jay is saying, is that they haven't gotten into the types yet or what it should look like, only that they supported the concept because they did vote at the meeting to do that.
I understand. We just have not received any formal statement to that effect, and I would expect that. Thank you, Jan. To me, this is almost a situation like the ride freebie. We've got the presentation in front of the Boardwalk and Beach Committee recommendations. So I'd look forward to your recommendations. I'd certainly support it. I think it's good, but there's obviously a cost factor that needs to be discussed. Kevin Williams, are you online? I don't see him on here. I was going to confirm with Kevin that my understanding of the existing light poles out there that have those white globes on them, that when it comes to antennas being put up there by Verizon, they're going to take down the light poles in entirety. They're going to put up a new light pole that's a little very similar in design. You almost might not be able to tell the difference. It's just a little thicker, a little bigger diameter at the top and the bottom, but the same design, same manufacturer. And then they're going to reinstall the same globes, but under that, as you saw Frank's diagram that he put up there, there's an antenna that's underneath the globe, and there's some equipment boxes, one or two on the pole. So my point is that according to my last conversation with Kevin Williams, is the wireless vendors are not being required to put new globes on. They will just take down and replace the same globe on there. So what that means is perhaps there's no immediacy to accelerating research on this, that even if the wireless antennas are put up, we can retrofit them all fairly easily, I think. But
let's find out, if I may interrupt.
Can I finish? So, you know, that's something that we need to do further research on. And I've lost my train of thought. Frank, do you have?
Sorry. Well, I would not be sure that the light posts that they are going to choose can be retrofitted later. And I think that we need to make sure that what they're buying and what we're buying is going to be what we want in the long run. And what my biggest fear here is that we get into a situation where we let them go ahead and put these lights on there, and then we find out, no, we have fence. So I think really what we need to do is find the correct light, make the decision, and do it now when it's the cheapest and when we have Verizon at least picking up part of the tab for it.
I'm all for that, but I'm not sure it's realistic in time frame, unfortunately. You know, I mean, you know, you're asking for a time frame for us to make decisions on new light poles in what, 1 month or 2 months? But we can send that message along to Kevin Williams. And again, I'm still looking forward to a recommendation, formal recommendation from the Beach. Chair Legree, when is your next Boardwalk Committee meeting?
It's on the 11th of January. We're starting at 10:30, and the agenda has been posted online, and we have not received any formal information from the city about what our parameters are, what the dates are, what the negotiations have been, who's been deciding what. We haven't the slightest idea. All I know is what I've read in the Cape Gazette and what I've received in communication from Public Works Director Williams after our last meeting, which was on 14 December. So everything I know has come after 14 December and now by the Cape Gazette and an email from Kevin Williams. So we don't know where we're flying, but we're working on it. Now, Tom Evans really had it nailed when he made his comments about the telecommunications companies being miles and miles ahead of us. Baby, they are. And we need to see what other cities are doing. Newark is building a smooth pole that contains their radios and their switch boxes and the meter. And now, as Frank showed you in his photograph, they have a cantenna on top and not the 5G array that we have. Our 5G antennas are megahertz. They're like between 28 and 35 megahertz, whereas the cantennas that Frank showed are a mid-range 5G antenna. And we won't be having those on the boardwalk. We're going to be having those arrays like you showed. but I only got this information from reading literature and doing research online. So I don't know where we're headed, but we're going to present some alternatives we have some ideas, and we're going to go forward, and then we'll do our best to make a recommendation, and it'll be our best recommendation.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'm going to go to the commissioners and then back to the dark skies people, see if they have any further comments, and we'll close it out with public comment and then back to you all. So I've got Commissioner Gossett and then Commissioner Byrne.
Just, I really appreciate the presentation. It's very informative, and it makes you really kind of understand one of the benefits of living at the shore. And at some point in the conversation or discussions at the committee level, if you could include discussions about other lighting sources, such as backlit signs along the boardwalk, security lighting from commercial buildings, etc. I don't know if we're able to address those, but at least some discussion that they cannot be addressed immediately or in future sign ordinances or something of that nature, to take a look at that. But just as part of the conversation, I would ask that that be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Byrne?
Yeah, thank you. I want to thank Commissioner Legree and the committee members for working on this, for bringing this to us, for putting together a really quality, informative, and brief presentation. It really hits, and it all makes good sense. Second point is that I chair the Environment Committee, and I think I mentioned briefly some weeks ago or a month ago to Commissioner Legree and the commissioners that this topic has come up with the Environment Committee, but there's been no real discussion. And I think it would, if it makes sense to you, to have this presentation at one of the upcoming Environment Committee meetings, not to get in the way of what you're doing, but to collaborate in a supportive way and to endorse the direction that I hear you talking about. So I'd be very willing to get that on either the January or February agenda, however it best fits and when it makes sense. The next meeting is January 14, and then there's a monthly meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick.
Thank you, Commissioner. Jan Conacy, and then we'll go to Tom Evans.
Okay, I simply wanted to reiterate one of the things when you were talking about the light poles and there was discussion about aesthetics and determination was not to put that in there, that it was put in different ways. Well, Tom and I don't always agree, but I have to agree totally with Tom this time. I think aesthetics should be in there. And I think the light people are way ahead of us. And what they can do in Newark, they ought to be able to do in Rehoboth. We are, if we were never front page before with the election of President Biden, incoming President Biden, we are front page news. And for us to take the lead in removing light pollution from our city and being forward in it, I don't know why the Boardwalk Committee, because Frank and Kate and I noticed this when we were at the Boardwalk Committee before. We could get more information from the Cape Gazette than the members of the Boardwalk Committee have been able to get from city staff about what's planned for the boardwalk. And as a citizen, I would expect the commissioners and the people serving on these committees to have that information and to know what was going on and to be kept up to date with it. And not having to go to the city of Newark or to the Cape Gazette or other sources to find out what we need. I am frightened. I'm not frightened about the pollution or whatever, not the pollution, the radio waves and all that stuff coming. I don't know very much about it. I heard Heather Metz's presentation. But if they're worried about it in cities like San Francisco and Seattle, we ought to be worried about it too. Those are high tech places where all the techie people, live and work and make $1 zillion. So we ought to be concerned about our appearance. And as Frank said, if we put up dark sky compliant boardwalk on the 17 poles that are going to be 5G, if it's 17, are they going to look exactly like the others right away? No. But over time, all of them will be replaced and all of them will look alike. And that's the only way you can do things. We don't have the money to replace every every light on the boardwalk, but they would be safer, they would be more pleasing. And Dick, I know that Kate and Frank and I would love to come to the environmental committee and do this presentation again. So thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Jan. Tom Evans?
Yeah, I want to thank Jan, Kate, and Frank. And Frank, Frank's passion about do it now is what Jan reiterated, is for these polls is of the utmost importance, because at the moment we have some leverage, and I don't say much, over whichever vendor it is. Is that Verizon? I forget.
Verizon.
Leverage. The polls are not there yet. We can call it completely aesthetics at the moment still, and it's majorly aesthetics, at least on the surface. And we can, Stan, put to them that we want to do this step right, because it dictates what we're going to do on the rest of the polls.
Yes.
We have dark skies as something, at least on the top line in the paper, saying this is where we're going. We could accomplish what Jan just laid out, which is not perfect polls now, but polls that at least meet our standards now and catch up later with the other polls, when we can get grants to do the same thing, be in the press, and get the boardwalk done right, because that is key to the success, commercial success of our beach town. I'd like to say that Pat Gossett was right on the right mark with his comments. What I'd like to say is that don't drop this, because this is what's in front of us now. And I would say until this topic came up, comment would have been, well, light trespass in the city, in residential areas, is becoming a big, big problem.
It's
buy
huge.
a $5 million house and somebody says, oh, you need 5 million lights. We do have sections of the code which address light pollution very softly. Believe me, you can't enforce them. They don't work. I've looked into them. If I have a neighbor that's like the one at, I won't pick out an address, pick any address you like that you're offended by the number of lights, that say, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I have a very expensive house and you can see me. That they're not only offensive, that's neither here nor there, but they also trespass. They also change the feeling of the street when you go by like a lighted up McDonald's in the middle of your block. And we need to be looking at those very carefully. And so I can take a little bit as chair of Board of Adjustment. Our Board of Adjustment did the right thing with the new school buildings. We made it, and I don't know that they're dark sky compliant, but that was our intent.
Right.
That all of the external lighting on the grounds be shaded downward, and I think they would make light compliant. But what we didn't know was, and we have not addressed this yet with the district, is that the number of windows and the number of lights they leave on in the school is light polluting and trespassing than the downlights. And that needs to be addressed not only with the school, but with buildings in town, primarily in residential. When you get to commercial, say it's advertising, and you're gonna have to deal with the commercial aspects. But starting on the boardwalk, moving to residential, but don't stop once we finish the boardwalk. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Commissioner Gay? Unmute yourself.
Okay. I totally agree with everything Tom just said, and it actually reminded me that in terms of the school project, that the lighting is one of the elements that is reviewed during site plan review for large projects. And in fact, the school, one of the conditions of approval was, I believe it's 3,000 kelvins. The lights can only be that bright. And if those requirements are going to be made in site plan review, then I think we also ought to be looking at the broader code for residential and commercial to make sure it's consistent. And so I totally agree with everything that's been said about that.
Commissioner Calusi.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate all the hard work that went into this presentation. It was very good, comprehensive, and I think really informative. Well, my question is I think, Mayor, you said it may be too late. Where are we in terms of a timeline as far as polls are concerned? Because if this is something we want to move forward with, we really need to act pretty immediately.
I checked a second ago.
Right. I don't know the timeline, Commissioner Calusi. What I will do is direct Sharon Lynn and Kevin to get a hold of Jay to discuss this. There really needs to be one go-to person on this. And I would designate Commissioner Legree to be the liaison between his committee and the Dark Skies people and the city folk.
Good. Well, because it seems that time is of the essence.
Yes, yes. Anything else?
I have been overwhelmed in the 3 weeks since we discussed this, how widespread the acceptance and the advocacy of dark sky is. I'm hearing it from everybody. I never even knew. And when God made Silver Lake, he had his moon and stars shining down. But when the turtles that come on shore and lay eggs, when the little turtles come out of the eggs, they go everywhere. They cross the street into my yard. Because there's lights everywhere. They don't know where the moon is. So let's fix the turtles.
All right. Well, thank you all. We're going to close this conversation. I'd like to thank Frank Cooper, Kate Markert, and Jan Conacy. And for those that don't know them, they are property owners and residents with obviously a passion about all things Rehoboth, but in this instance, Dark Skies program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners, for listening to us. Appreciate it.
Certainly.
Thank you.
With that, we're going to move on to the next item of business, which is commissioner announcements and comments. I'd open that up to the floor to see if anybody has comments and things. I will say that as a future agenda topic, we will be talking about the dolly signs, just all in its time. Anybody else?
Well, yeah, Mayor.
Commissioner Byrne, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to bring up the dollies sign before you just mentioned it. I'm not sure what all in its good time means, and I say that with all due respect, Mayor. But my comment is brief, but I just want to say that I want to go on public record as the city commissioner, support Mr. Eibach in moving his sign to the Eibach building if that's what he chooses to do, and to recommend that we do as a commission whatever we need to do to support that in short order. So,
well, let me interrupt. I appreciate you saying that. I'm going to shut you off because that ought to be an agenda topic in its own. As I've told you before, I've been in conversation with them, but we will have that. We will have that broader conversation, Commissioner Byrne. Thank you.
But timeliness is probably everything, and it's simply a commissioner comment. It's an agenda topic for further discussion right now.
Very good. Thank you. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? If not, we'll move. The next is review future meeting dates. I embedded in the agenda a list of dates. Of course, they're all subject to change. But our next meeting would be starting at 1:30 today. That's our first budget meeting. And then the next meeting would be January 12th, a Tuesday. That's a special meeting for COVID and post-pandemic outdoor dining, as well as continuation of the charter topic. And after that, the next budget meeting, number 2, is January 15th in the morning, and the regular voting meeting in the 15th. And you can read the rest of the schedule. With that, we've had citizen comment all along. And if there's no, yes, ma'am.
One small, I hope is a typo, I assume so, in this schedule. I just saw it a few minutes ago, and that is on February 8th, it's listed as workshop, special budget meeting, and special COVID meeting. And I believe the COVID meeting would be the 9th, not the 8th. So in other words, we don't have 3 meetings in the day. We have 2 on Monday and the 1 on Tuesday. Right. Anybody else see that?
February 9th. Good catch.
Yeah.
Thank you. With that, I have no more further comments. Thank you very much. I will see you all again at 1:30. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.